So when I was 45, I bought that old farm in Jefferson County with my disability money. The realtor warned me about curious locals, but I needed isolation after 3 tours overseas. My PTSD made crowds impossible, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile away through the woods. The farmhouse needed work, but it had good bones and thick walls. I installed motion sensors around the perimeter and kept my shotgun clean. The first few months were peaceful, just me and the land. I spent most mornings cutting brush, patching up the fence line, or tinkering with the busted water heater. Nights were quiet, except for the crickets and coyotes, which didn't bother me. I liked the silence. The people in town didn't ask many questions, but they stared a little too long at the gas station when I filled up. After a while, the cashier started calling me Anderson, after the family who'd owned the place before. I didn't correct him. I didn't talk much at all. Word must have spread because by July, kids had started daring each other to get close to my property. I found beer cans by the edge of my gravel drive, once a broken flashlight in the ditch. I didn't think much of it. Teenagers being teenagers. But I started keeping the porch light off and double-checking the locks at night. It was near the end of August when I heard the first real disturbance. It was around midnight. I was on the back porch smoking and watching the woods. That's when I caught a flash of something moving near the tree line. I didn't panic, just stood still and waited. No more movement. But when I walked the line the next morning, I found 2 sets of shoe prints in the mud by the fence. Small, like teenagers. I reset the motion sensors and left a trail camera facing that corner of the woods. A few days later, the camera caught 2 figures, blurry, but clearly boys. Maybe 15 or 16. They didn't try to get in, just stood there for a while. One of them threw a rock at the house. That's when I decided to keep my shotgun loaded and near the door. I didn't want trouble, but I wasn't going to be anyone's amusement either. I printed the photos and drove into town. The sheriff said he'd keep an eye out. He didn't seem surprised. The first visitors came not long after that. 2 boys walked up my drive near sunset. I saw them through the window before they even hit the porch. They were laughing, whispering, like they were on a dare. One of them kept glancing back toward the trees. My hands started shaking, the way they used to in Kandahar, when civilians got too close to the wire. I stepped back from the window, took a breath, and moved to the door. They knocked. 3 slow raps. The taller one said their car broke down. Wanted to use the phone. I kept the door closed. "Phone's not working," I said through the wood. "Town's that way, just keep walking." They didn't leave right away. Just stood there whispering. One of them kicked a pebble off the porch. The other looked at the windows like he thought he might see someone else inside. I stayed where I was. The sun was almost gone. I could hear bugs, the faint rustle of trees. After a minute or two, they started walking back toward the woods, slow, like they expected me to open the door and call them back. I didn't. Later that night, I checked the motion sensors. One had gone off on the east side of the house around 11:47 p.m. I checked the feed. Nothing on screen but shifting branches. Could have been a raccoon. Could have been something else. I sat in the dark, shotgun across my lap, watching the tree line through the back window. Didn't sleep much. The next morning, I found cigarette butts near the barn, and the wire fence bent just enough for a kid to crawl through. I fixed the fence, walked the perimeter, and didn't see anything else. I thought about driving into town again, but what was I going to say? Kids being nosy? Sheriff already knew. So I just went back inside, locked the doors, and waited. When they finally started walking toward my driveway, something in my brain switched over to combat mode. I grabbed my shotgun and stepped onto the porch without thinking it through. The boys froze when they saw me, and I fired one warning shot into the air above their heads. They ran faster than I'd seen anyone move since the military. I stood there for 20 minutes afterward, scanning the woods for movement and waiting for my heart rate to drop. That night I couldn't sleep, checking the motion sensor alerts every few minutes. I knew I'd probably scared some innocent kids, but I couldn't risk them coming back with friends. The next morning, I walked the edge of the property and found 2 shoe prints in the wet grass, right up by the fence again. Same size, same pattern as before. One had slipped slightly on the incline, digging a groove into the mud like someone panicked. I kept my shotgun slung as I did my rounds, not because I wanted to shoot anyone, but because I wasn't going to be caught off guard. After breakfast, I drove into town and picked up another trail camera and a box of heavy-duty floodlights. Word spread through town about the crazy veteran who shot at teenagers. The local mechanic who came to fix their Jeep the next day explained the whole situation to them. He told me later that he'd warned other folks to stay away from my property unless it was a real emergency. Some people called the sheriff's office, but I hadn't technically broken any laws by firing warning shots on my own land. The deputy who came by seemed to understand my situation and suggested I put up more no trespassing signs. He'd seen plenty of guys like me who just needed space to heal. I appreciated that he didn't make me feel like a criminal for protecting my peace. That same afternoon, I bought 6 more signs and placed them every 70 feet around the property line. 2 on the front gate, 1 at each corner of the fence, and 2 more where I knew kids had been sneaking through the trees. I wired the new lights to the motion sensors and made sure they lit up the driveway like daylight. I also adjusted the trail camera to send instant alerts to my phone, just in case anyone got too close again. The next week passed quiet. Then another. No movement at night, no prank knocks, no flashlights in the trees. The curious visitors stopped coming around. The teenage boys never pressed charges or caused more trouble, which I respected. I figured someone must have scared them straight. Probably their parents after hearing how close they came to getting shot. A few times I caught myself staring at the tree line, thinking maybe I overreacted. But then I'd remember the way the taller one kept looking back toward the woods, like someone else was out there. Like it was supposed to be a joke, but they weren't sure who the punchline was aimed at. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted, but those warning shots bought me the solitude I needed to work through my issues. I started therapy through the VA again. This time I stuck with it. I still don't sleep great, but the meds help. I work a small vegetable garden now and spend most mornings in the shop I built out of the old barn. I keep things simple. Mail, groceries, repairs, repeat. I don't go into town more than I need to, and nobody bothers me. 3 years later, I'm doing better with therapy and medication, but I still don't regret defending my boundaries. Some people called it antisocial behavior, but for me it was pure survival. You can't heal from war trauma when strangers keep showing up at your door. I learned that protecting your mental health sometimes requires actions that others don't understand. Now the only thing I hear at night is the wind moving through the trees and the occasional deer knocking through the brush. I like it that way. It's quiet. It's mine. When I was 20, my parents went out of town for the weekend and left me alone at our house in suburban Atlanta. I invited 3 friends over Saturday night to watch the game and hang out. We were having a good time. Loud music, pizza boxes all over the table, beer cans stacked like trophies on the counter. The living room smelled like pepperoni and cheap cologne. The kind of night that felt totally normal for a bunch of college guys with no supervision. Around 10 p.m., the house phone rang. Nobody ever used that number. It was one of those old cordless phones with a long antenna, buried under a pile of takeout menus near the fridge. I didn't even know it still worked. Everyone stopped for a second, looking at each other like we'd all heard a noise from the attic. I laughed and said something like, Probably a telemarketer. I picked it up. The voice on the other end was low. Male. Not slurred or angry, just dry. Flat. He said, "We know you're in there. We're coming soon." And then the line clicked off. I stood there, holding the phone. Just for a second. Then I looked at the caller ID. It just said unknown. My stomach did a weird flip. I told the guys. They started laughing, making jokes about horror movies. One of them, Drew, grabbed a kitchen knife and waved it in the air like he was in Scream. "We know you're in there," he repeated, mimicking the voice. Another Marcus yelled, "Oh, spooky!" While the third guy, Jay, suggested it was probably some kid prank calling people in the area. Still, I kept checking the front window. Something about the way the guy said it didn't sound like a joke. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I paused the game and walked toward the front window, brushing aside the curtain just enough to peek out. 2 men were standing on the porch. Not teenagers, not delivery drivers. They looked like they were in their 30s. One wore a dark jacket and jeans. The other had a baseball cap pulled low, hands in his pockets. A black pickup truck was idling at the curb, engine running, headlights still on. I backed away from the window and said, "Don't open the door." The guys came over to see what I meant. We all crouched near the front of the house. Jay whispered, "Who are they?" No one had an answer. We waited for them to ring the bell again, but they didn't. They didn't knock either. Instead, we heard the porch steps creak. Then silence. A second later, the sound of gravel crunching came from the side yard. I went into the kitchen and peeked out through the blinds over the sink. One of them was walking along the fence. The other stood at the corner of the backyard like he was waiting for something. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't random. This wasn't a delivery screw-up or lost travelers. They were scoping out the house. Drew muttered, "I'm calling the cops." But I grabbed his arm. "Not yet. Wait." I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was fear that calling 911 too early would somehow make it worse. Or maybe I just didn't want to speak out loud, like keeping quiet might keep us invisible. We turned off the TV and the lights. The house went still. We moved to the hallway between the living room and kitchen, crouched low, listening. No more voices. No more steps. Then, glass rattled. It came from the back, somewhere near the sliding door. Jay whispered, "They're checking for a way in." I nodded. I remember the feeling in my chest, like all the air was trapped. Not full panic yet, but the kind of dread that slows everything down. Marcus looked toward the stairs. Upstairs? We crept up, staying low, avoiding windows. The 4 of us huddled in my parents' room, the only one with blackout curtains. Drew locked the door and shoved a desk chair under the knob, like we were suddenly in some war movie. I had my phone now, screen brightness turned down, 911 screen pulled up, but my thumb hovering, still waiting. Outside, the truck engine stayed on, still no movement. Then a dull thud. Not a knock, just something soft hitting the side of the house. Jay whispered, "They're testing us." I believed him. For 5 minutes, there was nothing. Then one of the backyard motion lights clicked on. We all froze. I moved back to the bedroom window and pushed a tiny gap in the curtain. The truck was still there, but the men were gone. Just gone. I scanned the yard. Empty. "They're back there," I whispered. Drew had his phone out now too. "I'm calling." He did. Spoke low. Gave the address. Said someone was trying to get into the house. Said we were hiding upstairs. Said there were 4 of us. The dispatcher must have asked something because Drew whispered, "No, we don't see them now. But we saw them before." 2 men. 1 truck. Still running. Black Ford. 10 more minutes passed. The lights downstairs were still off. My legs started cramping from crouching. Then the motion light shut off again. And that's when I heard the back door handle jiggle. Not soft. Not like the wind. Someone was trying to open it. One of them tried the handle on our sliding patio door, while the other shined a flashlight through the kitchen windows. The beam swept across the cabinets, the table, then stopped on the floor like they were trying to spot movement. We stayed huddled in the back bedroom, lights off, barely breathing. I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I took out my phone, cupped it to block the screen light, and dialed 911 again. This time I whispered. The dispatcher answered right away, and I told her 2 men were still outside the house trying to get in. I gave her the address again, told her we were upstairs, said they hadn't broken anything yet but they kept circling the house. She told me officers were en route. I remember she asked if we were safe and if we had any weapons. I said no. She told us to stay put, stay quiet, and not engage with them. The light passed over the sink now. I watched it through the slats of the blinds. Then I heard the faint creak of footsteps on the back deck again. The handle jiggled, twice this time. I mouthed to my friends, "They're trying the door again." No one moved. Mike, who'd been pacing quietly, suddenly stood up. "I'm not just going to sit here," he muttered. I grabbed his arm before he could leave the room. "Don't be stupid," I whispered. "We don't know if they're armed." He looked pissed, but he sat back down. I could tell it was killing him to wait. It was killing all of us. The 10 minutes waiting for the cops felt like an hour. Every sound, every movement outside sent a jolt through me. At one point, one of the guys must have walked around the side of the house because the motion light tripped again. This time it stayed on longer. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him. Footsteps, gravel crunching. And then something tapped the living room window, just once, like a knuckle. We waited, silent. Then, finally, sirens. Far at first, but getting closer. When the sound got louder, the truck engine roared to life. Tires squealed. I ran to the corner of the bedroom window, peeled back the curtain a few inches, and watched them peel away from the curb. The taillights disappeared around the block just before the first squad car came flying down the street. The police showed up less than 2 minutes after that. Floodlights scanned the driveway and yard as officers moved around with flashlights. I met them at the front door, shaking, still holding my phone. There were 2 officers. One went around the side of the house, the other came in to talk to us. We all gave statements. I explained everything from the phone call to the door handle, the flashlight, the truck, the way they circled the house. The other guys backed it up. "Sounds like they thought the place was empty," one officer said. "Probably saw your parents leave and figured no one would be here. That call? They were checking." I told him I picked up the phone expecting a robocall. He nodded like that made sense. Some of them do that. If nobody answers, they know it's clear. If someone does, they hang up fast and leave. These guys must have been bold, figured it was worth checking anyway. He asked if we'd seen the license plate. We hadn't. I described the truck. Big, black, no obvious marks. Could have been any number of pickups. Another officer came back and said they didn't find any fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. They didn't break anything, didn't leave anything behind. Just a scare. A very close one. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room with the lights on, all 4 of us, waiting for daylight. Every car that drove by made us flinch. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. The next morning, I called my parents and told them what happened. They were back the next day. They had a security company come out that afternoon. Cameras, sensors, floodlights, everything. I remember watching the installers work, thinking, why didn't we have this already? My dad didn't say much. He just kept shaking his head. My mom kept hugging me like I was still a kid. The police cruisers drove by more often the next few weeks. I noticed them slowing near our house. They never caught the guys. No one in the neighborhood saw anything, and the cameras people did have were pointed the wrong way or not working. After that, I never stayed there alone again. Not once. Even now, I still don't answer the house phone. We keep it mostly unplugged, just in case. I think about how fast it all happened, how close it came to going wrong. If we'd been asleep, if Mike had opened the door, if they'd decided to force their way in, if we hadn't called 911. Sometimes it's not about what someone does, it's what they almost did. That's what stays with you. Not the broken window, not the damage, but the fact that two strangers decided to try our house that night. And if we hadn't picked up the phone, they might have walked right in. Now, every time an unknown number shows up on my screen, especially late at night, my heart skips a beat. I still listen for footsteps when the house gets too quiet, and when I walk past the back door, I make sure it's locked, even when I'm home. Because the worst part is knowing it wasn't personal. We weren't targeted because of who we were. We were just next. It happened last summer when I was doing late-night grocery shopping at the 24-hour food mart near my apartment in Phoenix. I'd gotten into this routine where I'd go around 11 p.m. Less people, faster checkout, no crying kids. That night felt no different. I parked in the back lot like always, under one of the old sodium lights that flickered a bit when the wind kicked up. It wasn't exactly well lit, but I didn't think much about it. I'd done this dozens of times before. Inside, the store had that usual quiet hum. Fluorescent lights, refrigerator fans, the occasional squeaky cart. It was the same few people I'd seen on other nights. A guy stocking shelves in aisle 5, a janitor mopping near the frozen foods, and a bored teenager at the register scrolling through his phone. I went straight to dairy to grab milk and eggs, figured I'd pick up some cereal on the way out. That's when I first noticed her. A woman, maybe 40, standing halfway down the aisle with nothing in her hands. No cart, no basket. Just standing there like she was waiting on someone. She was wearing black jeans, a plain zip-up hoodie, and her hair was pulled back tight. But it was her face that caught me, expressionless. But her eyes were locked on me like I'd done something to piss her off. It wasn't casual glancing. It was full-on staring. She didn't even blink when I looked at her. I felt weird and looked away, thinking maybe I reminded her of someone. I took a left toward produce, grabbed a couple bananas, and swung back through the drinks section. I figured I'd just circle around and avoid her aisle. But when I turned the corner past the bread, she was there again. Same posture, arms at her sides, nothing in her hands, just watching. Her head turned to follow me as I walked. I tried not to look directly at her, but every time I glanced, her eyes hadn't moved. I moved faster, pretending to browse frozen dinners. I checked the glass door's reflection. She was still there, just far enough to not be obvious, but close enough to make it clear she was tracking me. I opened a door and pretended to inspect the ingredients on a box of lasagna, trying to think if maybe she was security or undercover loss prevention. But she had no earpiece, no badge, no cart. She didn't even move her feet. Just stood there like a statue with that tight, angry face. I ditched the frozen section and moved down the cleaning supplies aisle. No one there. I waited a few seconds, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the store. Then I peeked out. She wasn't in sight anymore. I figured she gave up, or maybe realized I'd noticed. I kept moving, staying in the center of the store where the lights were brightest. I wanted to finish quick. When I got to canned goods, I saw her again. This time at the far end of the aisle, half hidden by the pasta sauces. Still no cart, still no movement. Her eyes locked on mine the second I turned. It was like she knew where I'd be going before I did. I took out my phone and pretended to text, really just opening the camera to get a picture of her. But when I raised it slightly, she stepped back behind the shelf. I never got the shot. I waited. 10, maybe 15 seconds. Then she stepped out again, farther down now, and just stared like before. I picked up my pace and headed for the front. I skipped the cereal and didn't even bother with the chips I wanted. I just wanted to get out. As I approached the checkout, I looked around. She wasn't behind me. The cashier didn't notice anything, just mumbled a "hey" while ringing up my stuff. I scanned my card, bagged my own items, and glanced over toward the pharmacy. She was standing just past it, partially behind a display of cold medicine. She wasn't even pretending to shop now, just watching me, not blinking. I didn't say anything to the kid at the register. What was I gonna say? Some lady's being creepy? He looked half asleep, and it would have sounded like I was making a scene. I just grabbed my bag and left through the automatic doors. They slid open slow and made that chime that sounds cheerful during the day but weird at night. Outside, it was quiet. A light breeze moved the cart corral sign back and forth with a squeak. The lot was mostly empty, only a few cars parked near the front. Mine was way in the back where I always left it. I walked fast, not running but not casual either. I checked over my shoulder halfway there. The doors were closing behind me, and she hadn't followed. I didn't see her in the glass. I figured it was done. Weird, but over. I got to my car, unlocked it with the fob, and opened the door. As I was putting the bag in the passenger seat, I looked up one last time toward the store. She was standing at the edge of the sidewalk now, right at the beginning of the parking lot, just far enough to be under the store lights, still watching, arms still at her sides, still not moving. The woman was standing next to a blue sedan parked 3 spaces from my car, still staring at me with that same hostile expression. Her arms were crossed, jaw set tight, and she made no effort to pretend she was just waiting on someone. I remember freezing for a second with my hand on the car door. She didn't look away, didn't blink, just kept her eyes locked on mine like she was daring me to do something. I got in as fast as I could, slammed the door shut, hit the lock button twice, and started the engine with shaky hands. My headlights lit her up, and she didn't flinch. I backed out fast, not caring about the curb angle, and drove toward the exit. As I passed her, I couldn't help glancing again. She pivoted slowly, eyes still tracking me like a security camera. For a second, I thought she might try to follow me. But when I checked the mirror as I pulled out onto the street, she was still standing there next to that car. The drive home was short, but I checked my rearview mirror at every intersection. I knew the taillights of the blue sedan just in case, but she didn't follow. No headlights behind me once I turned off the main road. I parked in the lot behind my apartment and sat in the car for a full minute before going inside. Locking the door felt heavier than usual that night. I told my roommate as soon as I walked in. She was sitting on the couch eating ramen, and I just blurted it out, word for word, like I needed to get it off me. She was quiet for a while, listening, then said, "That sounds like she's unwell, like mentally. Maybe she's off her meds or fixated on you or something." She didn't sound too alarmed, just confused. But I could tell by her face she found it strange too. That night I double-checked the window locks. I even slid a chair under the doorknob, which I'd never done before. It wasn't that I thought she'd come here. I didn't think she even knew who I was. But something about how focused she was on me made it hard to relax. That kind of intensity doesn't come from nowhere. 3 days later, I ran out of groceries. I considered going to the next store over, but it was far, and I'd just gotten off work. It was almost midnight. I figured, maybe she was a one-time thing. Maybe she wasn't even real. Maybe my brain made her out to be worse than she was. I told myself that to justify going back to the same food mart. The parking lot was emptier than before. I pulled up near the front under a light this time. Took a breath, walked in. The guy at the register was different. Older, kind of bored looking. Nothing seemed unusual. For the first 2 minutes, it felt normal. I picked up a basket, turned down the dairy aisle, and stopped cold. She was there. Same woman. Same spot. Same clothes. Her eyes met mine instantly, like she'd been waiting for me. She didn't move, didn't say anything, just stared. I didn't even pretend to browse. I turned right around, walked back out, and left the basket sitting on the floor. I didn't run, but my chest was tight the whole way to the car. As I pulled out of the lot, I looked once more. She was standing at the glass doors now, watching. I didn't go back to that store after that. I started driving farther to get groceries, 15, 20 minutes sometimes. I didn't care. I started going during the day too, not at night. Changed up the times, the routes, the places I parked. I didn't tell many people. A few close friends. Most just said it was weird. Maybe she mistook me for someone else. But nobody had answers. Weeks passed and I never saw her again. But it changed how I moved through the world. I found myself scanning crowds, checking reflections, avoiding eye contact with strangers. I'd never thought of myself as someone who could be targeted by a stranger, especially not for no reason. But that's the part that messed with me the most. There was no reason. Nothing happened. No confrontation. She never spoke, never touched me, just watched. Like she knew something about me I didn't. I still don't know who she was. I never got a license plate. Never even saw her speak to another person. For all I know, she only existed in those 2 moments. Like something that came out of nowhere just to remind me that peace of mind is fragile. That not all threats look like violence. Some of them just stare and wait. And that was enough. So when I was 28, I drove from Texas to Virginia for my cousin's wedding. I figured I'd save money on airfare and just take my time on the road. I didn't make many stops, just pushed through state after state with my old Civic packed full of snacks, a cooler, and some basic tools in case of a breakdown. By the time I hit Tennessee, I'd been driving for about 12 hours straight. It was sometime past 10 when I started running into construction zones. A bunch of exits were closed off, and a few signs were missing. My GPS rerouted me 3 times, then gave up entirely. I got turned around trying to get back on the interstate, and ended up in some part of town I didn't recognize. Nothing looked familiar, and the roads were mostly empty. Just a few fast food places and gas stations closing up. I pulled into a gas station to ask for directions, or maybe grab a motel room if there was anything nearby. The attendant was this older guy with a mustache and a stained baseball cap. He just said everything close was booked because of some music thing going on downtown, a big festival or something. I hadn't heard anything about it. I asked if he knew any smaller places on the outskirts. He pointed toward the highway and said, "Try past the old shopping center. There's a couple motels out that way. Might still have a room or 2. I drove another 15 minutes through mostly empty roads until I saw a glowing red vacancy sign next to a single-story building with chipped paint and flickering lights. The place looked like it hadn't been touched since the 80s. The front office door had a cracked glass panel taped over and buzzed when I walked in. A woman in a pink bathrobe sat behind the counter watching an old tube TV. She barely looked up, just slid a clipboard toward me. No ID check, no questions, just took my cash and handed me a key with a bent aluminum tag that read 7. The room was in the back, next to a broken vending machine. I could smell cigarettes before I even opened the door. Inside, the walls were yellowed from smoke, and the carpet was worn down in the middle. The air conditioning unit under the window rattled for a few seconds, then gave out a weak breath of warm air before falling silent. I flipped the light switch and only one lamp turned on. The bedsheet had stains, and there was a crusted-over ashtray on the nightstand. I covered the bed with plastic grocery bags from my trunk and laid down fully dressed, just hoping to catch a few hours of sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to muffled voices through the wall. At first, I thought it was just the TV in the next room. But then I realized they were talking. Loud. A man kept repeating his name. Ray. That's right, Ray, baby. Like he was proud of it. There was a woman with him, and they were clearly drunk. She was slurring her words and started ranting about her job, something about her boss being a liar and someone stealing from her. Ray just laughed and kept telling her to calm down. The walls were so thin, I could hear them like they were in the same room. Their voices would go from laughing to yelling, back to laughing in cycles. I reached for my earplugs in the backpack and shoved them in, but it didn't do much. Every time I started to doze off, another loud slam would shake the wall behind my head. At one point, I heard what sounded like a chair tipping over. Then the woman started crying, loud, open crying like something had just broken inside her. She kept saying, "They're all watching me," over and over. Ray tried to calm her down, but his voice got sharper, meaner. He was saying things like, "You need to stop talking crazy," and "You're gonna get us in trouble." I sat up in bed, listening harder. The crying didn't stop, it just got more erratic. I heard the woman say, "You don't know what they're doing. They know where I am." Then there was a loud thump against the wall. Something big. I couldn't tell if something fell or if someone hit something. I waited, holding my breath, but the room went silent for a few seconds. Then the music came on, low at first, then louder. Some classic rock station or maybe a CD. They played the same song twice, and I could hear Ray singing along off-key. I looked at my phone, hoping for a signal in case I needed to call someone, but the bars kept disappearing. No Wi-Fi either. I checked the door, made sure the lock was set and the security bar was latched. I didn't like the way the woman's voice kept changing. At first she sounded drunk, but now she was talking too fast, asking weird questions like, "How many of them are in the hallway?" and "Is the floor safe?" Ray didn't answer most of what she said. Sometimes he'd snap, tell her to shut the hell up, or "Take your meds already." But other times he'd talk low and calm like he was trying to keep her from spiraling. They stayed loud for what felt like another hour, then suddenly went quiet. No music, no voices. I waited, staring at the wall, wondering if they left. Then I heard it. 3 short knocks, somewhere outside. Not my door, not loud, just knock, knock, knock. Then footsteps. Not heavy, just enough to know someone was pacing. I held my breath and leaned off the bed, checking the peephole. Nothing there. The hallway was empty. A door down the row creaked open. I couldn't tell which one. Then the woman's voice again, just a whisper. "Ray, don't let them in." He told her to get back inside. Then something slammed. After that, there was nothing. Total silence. No music. No talking. Just the low hum of the vending machine out front and a single moth tapping against the room's dirty window. By dawn, I could hear every word like I was standing inside their room. The woman was screaming about money, about her job, about how Ray had ruined everything. She was completely hysterical. Things crashed hard against the walls, glass maybe, or furniture. A loud slam shook the headboard on my bed. Ray was yelling back, but not angry, just trying to get her to calm down. He kept saying, "You need to stop this. You're gonna get us both arrested." She didn't care. Her voice was shrill and panicked, like she wasn't even talking to him anymore, like she was shouting at the world. Then suddenly, silence. Not like a pause. It was complete, like someone hit a switch. I sat up, waiting to hear more. Nothing. Then the silence broke with this high-pitched scream that tore through the wall. It wasn't yelling anymore. She was screaming like someone just got stabbed or worse. It went on for maybe 5 seconds, long enough to make me freeze in place. Then I heard the door to their room slam open, heavy boots on the pavement outside, a car engine roaring to life. She peeled out of the parking lot so fast I thought she was going to crash into the building. Then it was dead silent again. No music. No Ray. No sound at all from that room. I waited 20 minutes, just staring at the wall, trying to hear anything. A cough. A footstep. Even a phone ring. Nothing. That silence started to feel heavier than all the noise before. I kept thinking maybe he was unconscious, or worse. I didn't want to get involved, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was seriously wrong over there. I finally called the front desk around 7:30. The woman from the night before must have gone home, because this time it was a man who answered. His voice was raspy and impatient. I told him I'd been up all night listening to a fight in the next room, and now it had gone quiet after the woman sped off. I said maybe someone needed help. He grunted like I'd woken him up, said he'd check. 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps shuffle past my door. Then a soft knock. "Motel staff," he said. "Anyone in there?" No answer. Another knock. Still quiet. I heard keys jingling. Then the door to room 8 creaked open. There was a long pause, then a sharp inhale. The clerk's voice dropped low and panicked. He stepped out and made a call right there from the hallway. Within 15 minutes, 2 police cruisers and an ambulance rolled into the lot. I watched through the curtain as paramedics went inside with gloves and gear. A few minutes after that, a gurney came out, but it wasn't moving fast. No one looked rushed. One of the cops came to my door, asked if I'd heard anything. I gave him a quick version, arguing, the car leaving, then silence. He jotted notes and told me they'd probably want a formal statement later. Ray was dead. That was all they said at first. I heard more later when the detective came back. Cocaine mixed with hard liquor. Probably a heart attack, maybe during the screaming. There was no sign of a struggle, no knife or weapon, just the aftermath of someone's body giving out. The woman had vanished. No wallet, no ID, not even a phone left behind. Just her name, if that was even real. They were still trying to find her. I gave a full statement at 10:30, answered every question. When did the music start? How long had they been arguing? Had I seen her face? What did the car sound like? I didn't have much to offer besides the timeline and the sounds. I told them about her saying people were watching her, the paranoia, the crying. They wrote it all down. I left the motel after noon, 6 hours behind schedule. I didn't even feel tired anymore. Just hollow. My car smelled like stale fries and sweat, but I didn't care. I drove without turning on the radio. Just silence the whole way. The wedding in Virginia was fine. People were happy. Speeches, dancing, drinks. I went through the motions and didn't say much. My cousin asked if I was okay, said I looked wiped out. I told him the drive was rough, left it at that. When I got back to Texas, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not in a dramatic way. Just flashes. Her voice echoing through the wall, the knock of the master key, the sound of the gurney wheels on the sidewalk. It all stuck with me. A few weeks later, I made an appointment at a clinic and talked to someone. Told them everything. The counselor said witnessing death, even indirectly, can mess with your brain more than people realize. Said sometimes it's not about what you saw. It's what you imagined, what you filled in during the silences. It helped, slowly. But I still don't stay in motels anymore. Not the roadside kind. Not the kind with rooms that open to a parking lot. And I always ask for a room on the end, with no neighbors. Sometimes being in the wrong place at the wrong time means you carry someone else's ending with you. I didn't know Ray. But I know how he died. I know the last words he heard. That's more than most people get. That's more than I wanted. So when I was 31, I rented a cabin at Lake Tahoe for a long weekend to escape the stress from my law firm. I needed to clear my head after pulling 3 all-nighters on a corporate merger case. The place was small, 1 bedroom, wood stove, no TV. That's what I wanted. No screen, no calls, just trees and quiet. The cabin was maybe 200 feet from the lake, with a gravel driveway and a rickety wooden porch that creaked every time I stepped on it. You could smell pine everywhere, and the air was crisp, even in early September. I got there Friday afternoon, unpacked, and made myself a sandwich before walking down to the water. I didn't swim, just stood there watching the ripples. The lake was calm, no boats, no people. Only the breeze and the water tapping against the rocks. It was exactly what I needed. That night I fell asleep early with the window open and the wind moving through the trees. Saturday morning I made coffee and sat out on the porch wrapped in a hoodie. I read a few chapters of a paperback legal thriller I'd bought at the airport, then went inside to write in a notebook. No Wi-Fi, no distractions. Around 5 I changed into my running gear and went out on the gravel road that curved around the lake. The sun was dipping low, shadows stretching long across the trail, and I got into a rhythm. My legs were sore from the drive the day before, but it felt good to move. About 20 minutes in, I saw a red pickup coming toward me. An old Chevrolet, paint faded, and one of the headlights slightly fogged over. The guy driving looked to be in his late 50s, with a trucker cap pulled low and sunglasses on. He gave me a wave, just 2 fingers lifted from the wheel, and I raised my hand back without thinking. It didn't feel odd at the time. I figured he was a local, probably used to runners or tourists using the trail. He passed me going the opposite direction, slow but steady, and I kept jogging without looking back. I ran for another half hour, made the loop, and got back to the cabin just after the sky turned orange. My shirt was damp, and I left it on the porch rail to dry before heading inside to shower. The water pressure was weak, but it worked. After, I threw on sweats, made a grilled cheese, and took my book back out to the porch. There were no porch lights, so I had a small lantern beside me, just enough to see the pages. It was completely still outside. No wind, no animals, no sounds. Around 10:30, I was halfway through the book and thinking about bed when I heard an engine in the distance. It got louder, tires crunching slow over the gravel. I stood and leaned over the railing. The headlights appeared through the trees, sweeping the bend in the road. It was the same red pickup, same dent in the front fender. But this time the driver didn't wave. He just rolled past at maybe 15 miles an hour, window down but eyes straight ahead. I watched him pass. He didn't glance toward the cabin, Didn't slow down, just kept driving until the taillights disappeared around the curve. I didn't move for a minute, just listened. The truck was gone, but the sound of the engine hung in the air longer than it should have. I sat down again, but didn't pick up the book. I stared at the trees instead. I told myself it was nothing. Probably a neighbor. Maybe he lived further up the road and was just getting back from town. Still, something about it rubbed at me. The first time felt casual. The second time didn't. At 11, I went inside and locked the door. The front lock was a deadbolt with a sticky turn. I had to lean my shoulder into it a little. Then I flipped the switch on the porch light, forgetting it didn't work. I stood at the window for a while before I turned off the lantern and moved into the kitchen. I figured coffee would help me shake the feeling, so I set the kettle on the gas burner and leaned against the counter. From the kitchen window, I had a partial view of the road between the trees. The angle wasn't perfect, but I could see enough. I stood there, arms crossed, waiting for the water to boil and watching the space between the trunks. The wind had picked up again, brushing the tops of the pines. I didn't hear the truck right away, but I saw the lights. Through the trees, faint and slow moving. Then the crunch of tires came again, and this time slower than before. The pickup came crawling past the cabin, headlights washing over the porch. I ducked low instinctively, eyes just above the edge of the sill. The driver's face wasn't visible from that angle, but the outline of his head didn't move. The brake lights flickered like he tapped them, just once. Then the truck rolled out of view. I backed away from the window and stood in the middle of the kitchen. My pulse had picked up. The kettle started to whistle and I turned off the flame without pouring. I left the mug empty and walked into the living room, then backtracked and shut off the porch lantern. Every window felt like an exposure point. I checked the back door, locked, and then turned off the bedroom light. I didn't want to sit in full darkness, so I turned on a small lamp and kept the curtains drawn. That was the third time I'd seen the same truck in a few hours. First wave, second pass, third crawl. It wasn't just a neighbor out for a drive. I thought about getting in my car and heading back to town, but I didn't want to do anything yet. Not unless I saw the truck again. I walked back to the kitchen window and stood there, eyes on the road. Just after 11, I heard footsteps on the gravel outside my cabin. At first, I told myself it might be a raccoon or maybe a deer, but the steps didn't match that kind of movement. It was steady and slow, like someone trying not to be heard. I froze where I stood in the kitchen, still watching the space between the trees. The footsteps circled toward the side of the cabin. I backed away from the window. There was a soft creak on the porch boards. Then silence. Then another slow step. Whoever it was, they were right outside. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark, straining to listen. I heard the click of the door handle. A gentle rattle, not enough to force anything, just testing. I moved into the hallway, heart thudding, and ducked low to stay out of sight from the windows. A shadow passed across the living room curtains. Tall, slow-moving, definitely human. The back door handle jiggled next. I moved to the bedroom and grabbed the baseball bat I'd packed for hiking, more out of habit than anything else. I kept it by the bed in a duffel bag. My hands were slick on the grip. I grabbed my phone, crouched behind the couch, and called the resort number posted on the fridge. It went straight to voicemail. Next, I dialed 911. I kept my voice low and gave them the cabin address, told them someone was outside, trying doors. The dispatcher asked if I could see the person, and I said no, but I could hear them. They said officers were on the way, but it would take about 40 minutes, maybe longer. I didn't like that answer, but I understood. I hung up and stayed low. The footsteps kept circling. porch boards again. Gravel. Silence. Then more rattling at the side windows. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The bat felt useless, but it was something. The person walked the perimeter at least 3 more times. I heard them step onto the porch again. This time they stayed there for a minute, just standing still. No movement. No noise. Then I heard it. The softest creak as they leaned against the window. I gripped the bat tighter and waited. Then the sound of footsteps again, but this time moving away. Then an engine turning over in the distance. Tires crunching on gravel, fast this time, fading. I waited another 5 minutes before I dared move. At 12:30, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Johnson stepped out with a flashlight and introduced himself. He had a notepad and calm voice, like he'd done this 100 times. I told him everything. The red pickup, the 3 passes, the footsteps, the door handles. He nodded slowly through all of it. He said I wasn't the first. There had been 6 reports in the past month, all solo guests in cabins like mine. The guy didn't always break in. Sometimes he just watched. They suspected he'd been scoping people out during the day, seeing who was alone, what kind of stuff they had. Laptops, phones, cameras. When I described the red Chevy and the man inside, Johnson gave me a look like he already knew. Rick Morrison, he said. Lives down near Miller's Hollow. He's been seen in the area during past incidents. Truck matches. Been trying to catch him, but he's slippery. Doesn't stay long. The officer stayed another hour. He walked the perimeter with his light, checked the windows and door handles, and found partial boot prints in the dirt behind the kitchen. Too shallow for prints, but clear enough to see where they'd walked. He said he'd forward everything to the detective handling the case. Before leaving, he told me to keep the doors locked and the lights off. Don't make it look like anyone's home, he said. But if he comes back, call immediately. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat on the floor with my back against the bedroom wall, bat across my lap, eyes fixed on the curtain edge, phone in hand. Every sound outside felt louder than it should have been. Wind, creaking wood, branches tapping the siding. I kept the lights off, just like the officer said. At 8 the next morning, I packed everything fast. Didn't make coffee, didn't shower, just shoved clothes into my bag, tossed it in the car, and left. The gravel crunched too loud under my tires. I turned left out of the drive and headed straight into town. Around 10, I got a call from the sheriff's office. They'd picked up Rick Morrison, said they'd gone out to his trailer just after sunrise, found the red truck in the driveway. When they brought him in, he confessed to the whole thing. Admitted he'd been watching cabins for weeks. Said it started as just looking, but then he realized how easy it was. He told the deputies he'd seen me arrive Friday night. Followed me from the store to the cabin. Saw I was alone. Waited until dark to approach. Said he always walked the place first. If it looked empty, he'd try to slip inside. If not, he'd leave. I was awake, so he left. He'd done the same thing to others, checked for movement, tested doors, listened. Sometimes he got in, took whatever he could grab quick. Other times he bailed. He wasn't armed, he said. Didn't want trouble. Just easy money. I didn't know what to say. They said he'd been arrested for trespassing and attempted burglary. Said he had a record, mostly petty theft. Probably wouldn't do much time. I thanked them and hung up. I left Lake Tahoe that afternoon. I drove slower than usual, kept checking the mirror. Every red pickup made me tense. Every rest stop felt like a risk. Back home, I didn't talk about it much. Just told people I'd had a rough weekend. It took months before I could go anywhere alone again without scanning the woods first. I still carry that bat in my trunk, even now. I learned something during that weekend, that sometimes danger doesn't come with noise or warning. Sometimes it creeps up slow, circles the house, and tests the handle while you're reading on the porch. And sometimes, the friendly wave on the trail isn't friendly at all. When I was 23, I worked nights at a small auto repair shop just outside of Detroit. It was one of those family-run garages where the boss trusted you enough to leave you alone after hours if you got the work done. I'd show up around 9:30 p.m., turn on the lights, and work on whatever jobs hadn't been finished during the day. Usually brakes, tire rotations, oil changes, nothing too serious. My girlfriend Lisa worked nights too, cleaning commercial buildings downtown. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from her route, and she usually came home around 1 a.m., while I'd finish up closer to 3 or 4 depending on how much work I had. Lisa isn't the type to exaggerate or imagine things. She's practical, one of those people who double-checks the locks before leaving, keeps receipts in a labeled folder, and doesn't watch scary movies because they're a waste of time. That's why I didn't know how to respond when she called me that night around 11:40 p.m. She never called during work unless it was important. She sounded calm, but I could tell something was off in her voice. She told me she'd been going through her usual checklist at the office building she cleaned, an old converted warehouse in Greektown that had been turned into shared office space for small businesses. The building had 3 floors, each one split into several units with startups, agencies, and IT firms. Most nights she was alone in there, except for Dan, the nighttime security guard. She said Dan usually kept to himself, walked his rounds every hour, and sometimes fell asleep at the front desk. That night, Lisa said she had just finished vacuuming the main lobby on the 2nd floor and was walking back toward the stairwell to check the alarm panel in the far wing. As she passed one of the side corridors, she noticed a light on inside a storage room. That room was supposed to be empty, just leftover furniture and some old boxes, according to the building manager. Lisa figured maybe someone left the light on earlier, or Dan had been in there checking something. It wasn't a big deal, but since she had keys to everything, she decided to take a look and turn it off. The hallway back there is narrow, about 6 feet wide, with flickering fluorescent lights overhead. The carpet is old, stained in spots, and the door to the storage room is one of those heavy gray ones with a push bar, but it was propped open. She said she approached the door slowly, thinking maybe Dan was inside. From where she stood, she could see someone sitting at the desk just inside the room. It looked like Dan. Same uniform, same build, same short haircut, sitting with his back to her. She called out his name once. No answer. She tried again, a little louder. Still nothing. She said the way he was sitting made her uncomfortable. His back was too straight, his arms just hanging stiff at his sides, and his head was tilted slightly like he was looking down at something, but not moving at all. She stood in the doorway and said his name again, ready to step in and check on him. Then she heard his voice. Clear, unmistakable, coming from the hallway behind her. He was on the radio with someone, talking about an alarm reset. She turned her head and saw him walking down the corridor, holding the radio up to his mouth, heading toward the stairwell. Fully awake, fully alert. Nowhere near the room. She turned back toward the storage room, but it was empty. The chair was there, slightly turned toward the desk, but nobody in it. No sound, no footsteps. Just the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of the radio echoing from the hallway. She stepped back, slowly closed the door, and walked straight out of that wing without looking back. When she called me, she was already downstairs by the front exit. Dan had gone outside for a smoke, and she didn't say anything to him. She just stood near the door and told me everything in a low voice, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. I asked her if she wanted me to come pick her up, but she said no. She just wanted to finish the rest of her shift quickly and get out of there. I told her to keep the phone on speaker and stay on the line until she got to the car. She didn't go back into that wing again. She left the vacuum behind, skipped the trash in 2 of the offices, and walked fast through the rest of the building. She made it to her car around 12:10, locked the doors, and didn't say much else. Just, "That wasn't him," before hanging up. Lisa spun around toward the hallway, heart thudding so loud she could barely hear herself gasp. Dan's voice was still coming from somewhere behind her, but her focus snapped back to the figure in the room. The man behind the desk, who just seconds ago had looked like Dan from behind, was turning his head, but not in any way a normal person would. His neck twisted slowly, with audible cracks, until his face was looking directly at her while his body remained facing the desk. She froze. His face was pale, oily, with deep creases at the mouth like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot and unblinking, staring right through her with this cracked grin like he thought something was funny. The uniform was close to what Dan wore, but the patches were wrong, the name tag missing. She took 1 step back, her heel catching on the doorway, and that was when he moved. The man jolted to his feet, slamming his knees into the metal desk and knocking it backward. Lisa let out a full scream and bolted. Behind her, she heard chairs toppling and something metal clattering to the floor. She sprinted toward Dan's voice, her shoes pounding the concrete hallway. As she rounded the corner, she saw Dan just finishing his radio call, his face lit with confusion. She ran straight into him, nearly knocking them both over. She was shaking and couldn't form words at first. Dan tried to calm her down, glancing behind her, probably expecting a fire or something serious. Lisa finally got out something like, "He's in there. Someone. He's not you. It wasn't you. He moved weird. He chased me." Dan's expression changed instantly. He keyed the radio again and called for immediate backup. Within minutes, 2 other guards showed up, both of them younger, still zipping up their coats as they jogged down the corridor. Dan pulled Lisa aside and told her to stay where she was. He and the others approached the storage room cautiously, flashlights drawn, one of them with a collapsible baton already extended. The room was empty. The desk was tilted at an angle, chairs knocked over, paper scattered everywhere. One of the emergency exit doors at the back of the room was propped open with a brick. Dan stepped through carefully and looked out into the alley behind the building, but the place was dead quiet. Just cold wind and the buzz of a flickering streetlight in the distance. One of the guards checked the window on the far wall and found it unlocked. Outside, there was a narrow ledge above the alley, just wide enough for someone to stand on if they were careful. A few dirty handprints were smeared near the sill. Back in the control room, they reviewed the security footage. It didn't take long to find him. Around 9:12 p.m., a man with dark jeans and a hoodie approached the side of the building. The camera angle wasn't great, but you could see him pry open the old basement window with a screwdriver and slip inside. 15 minutes later, he appeared again in one of the interior hallway feeds, now wearing a stolen security jacket. He moved slowly, checking doors, looking into offices. At one point, he ducked behind a vending machine as Dan passed nearby on his normal patrol. He was watching the whole time, waiting. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Lisa gave them her statement while clutching a cup of tea one of the guards had made. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. A pair of officers swept the basement and the surrounding blocks, even checking some of the boarded-up buildings nearby. But the man was gone. No footprints in the alley, no sign of forced entry at the exit door. Just that open window and the grainy black and white footage of him creeping through the hallways. 2 days later, detectives identified the jacket. It had been stolen from a commercial laundry company that serviced uniforms for local private security firms. A delivery van had been broken into a few weeks earlier. 3 jackets, 2 radios, and a bundle of blank ID tags were missing. No suspect had been arrested in that case. Lisa didn't sleep the night it happened, or the next. She kept seeing the face in the mirror every time she went into the bathroom. That slack, broken grin, the way his head had turned so far like it wasn't connected to the same bones and muscles as normal people. The police said he was probably on something. Meth, maybe. Something strong. A toxicology expert told Dan it wasn't uncommon for addicts to dislocate joints or injure themselves during psychotic episodes without even noticing. They guessed he'd found the jacket in a dumpster, wandered the building looking for things to steal, and had been trying to scare Lisa away when she got too close. But she wasn't convinced. She couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been waiting in that room, that he'd heard her cleaning nearby and sat quietly behind that desk, listening, watching, just waiting for her to come to the doorway. She quit the job the following week. No notice, no explanation. She didn't even return to pick up her paycheck. She left her cleaning supplies in the trunk of her car and never looked back. For weeks after, she refused to be alone at night. She couldn't walk past open doorways without glancing in. She started locking the bathroom door when she showered, even when she was home alone in broad daylight. I tried to be there for her, to help her forget. But some nights she'd wake up breathing fast, and all she could say was, "He was already in the room." The scariest part wasn't the way he looked. It wasn't the stolen uniform, or the silent footage of him walking down the halls. It was realizing how long he'd been there before she noticed. That night made both of us understand something we hadn't thought much about before. When you're working alone in a quiet building, you think you'd know if someone else was there, but you don't. So when I was 20, I was studying economics with my roommate Rachel at this little cafe near campus. It wasn't a chain or anything, just a tiny local place with mismatched chairs and old photos on the walls. We liked it because it was quiet during the afternoon and the coffee was decent enough to keep us coming back. That day was no different. We'd both had midterms that morning, so we decided to chill there for a couple hours, go over our notes, maybe start prepping for the next set of exams. It was late October, chilly but not freezing, and the cafe had that dry warmth that made you want to take your jacket off and stay a while. We'd been there about an hour and a half. I had my headphones in, low volume, and Rachel was scrolling through something on her laptop when she suddenly nudged me. I pulled one earbud out and looked at her, and she nodded toward the far corner of the room. There was a woman sitting alone at the last table. This middle-aged lady wearing a dark green sweater and a plain black coat draped over the back of her chair. She had a half-empty cappuccino in front of her, and her hands were folded on the table like she was waiting for something. But she wasn't looking at the door. She wasn't looking around. She was staring at me. Not just a glance, either. It was one of those direct, fixed looks, like I was under a microscope or something. Her eyes didn't shift. Her mouth wasn't moving. She wasn't blinking much. Just sitting there, completely still, watching me like I owed her something. I looked away and leaned over to Rachel. "Do you know her?" I whispered. Rachel shook her head. "She's been staring at you for like 20 minutes, she said. "I thought maybe you knew her." I looked back at the woman. Same position, same stare. My chest felt tight. I didn't recognize her at all, and I tried to think back. Had I bumped into her on the street? Cut in front of her in line? Nothing came to mind. I tried not to let it get to me. Cafes attract weird people sometimes. Maybe she was just lost in thought, and it only looked like she was staring at me. I went back to my notebook and tried to focus on my stats revision. Flipping the page like that would help me concentrate. But I couldn't. I could feel her eyes on me, steady and heavy. I waited a few minutes, then glanced up again. She was still watching. This time, it was worse. Her face had changed, slightly. Her jaw was tighter, her mouth pressed into a thin line. It wasn't a blank stare anymore. It looked more like irritation, like she was annoyed or angry. I didn't understand it, but it felt personal. Like she wasn't just looking at me. She was judging me for something I didn't remember doing. I tried to shake it off. "Let's just finish this chapter," I said to Rachel. "We'll be out of here in 20 minutes. But as I said it, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. The woman had moved. She wasn't at her corner table anymore. Now she was sitting 2 tables closer to us. Same posture, same untouched cappuccino, same unblinking stare. Rachel looked at me, wide-eyed. "Okay, that's creepy," she whispered. She hadn't made a sound moving the table. We hadn't noticed her stand up. She had just changed positions, like a chess piece on a board, slowly zeroing in. I tried to avoid eye contact, acting like I hadn't noticed. Maybe if I ignored her, she'd stop. Maybe she had some issue and wasn't trying to freak anyone out on purpose. I kept telling myself stuff like that. But every time I looked up, every single time, her eyes were right there, locked onto mine. She wasn't looking around the room. She wasn't pretending to read or scroll her phone. Her hands stayed folded neatly in front of her. Her coffee was still half full. She hadn't taken another sip. The cup had gone cold by then. I was sure of it. It just sat there like decoration. 10 more minutes passed. Then Rachel leaned in and said, "We should go. Right now." I nodded. My hands were shaking a little as I slid my laptop into my backpack. I didn't want to make it obvious that we were leaving because of her. But it didn't matter. She knew. I could feel her eyes tracking my every motion, zipping the bag, standing up, shrugging on my coat, picking up my water bottle. Her head didn't turn, but her eyes followed everything. I didn't look at her directly again. I kept my eyes on Rachel and the door, but the feeling of her stare clung to me like static. We walked slowly, trying not to rush. The cafe wasn't crowded, but there were still enough people that I didn't want to make a scene. I could feel her watching me as we passed her table. I could see her profile in the edge of my vision. She didn't even pretend to glance away. Just sat there, still as ever, eyes fixed on me. Her face was tight now, like she was holding something back. Anger, or something else. Something worse. We walked out without saying a word, and I could feel her gaze burning into the back of my head until the door swung shut behind us. Outside the cafe, I looked back through the window and saw her standing at the glass, still watching us walk away. Rachel said maybe it was just someone who thought they recognized me, but the woman's expression seemed too intense for a case of mistaken identity. Her hands were still folded in front of her. She hadn't moved from that spot, just stood there, face half lit by the streetlight, locked onto us as we crossed the road. I quickened my pace a little without thinking. Rachel followed, not saying anything for a few steps. "Maybe she's just off," Rachel said finally. "You know? Like, mentally." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. I'd seen enough strange people around campus. Most kept to themselves. This felt different. We walked the 15 minutes back to our dorm, chatting about our upcoming exam and gradually forgetting about the weird encounter. I tried to push it out of my head, just one of those random campus oddities. College towns attract all kinds of strange people. That's what I kept telling myself. It helped a little. By the time we got to our building, the sky was fully dark and the temperature had dropped. Rachel swiped her key card, and we climbed the narrow stairs to our second-floor room. The hallway lights flickered the way they always did when it got cold. Our door creaked the same way it always did. We locked it behind us and turned the heater up a notch. Normal things. Familiar routines. We pulled our laptops out again and started reviewing our economics formulas. Rachel was testing me on elasticity equations, and I was flipping through flashcards when she suddenly got up and walked over to the window. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just stood there for a second, holding the curtain halfway shut. Then she said, "You need to come look at this." I stood up and joined her. She didn't move as I stepped beside her and looked down into the courtyard. The same woman was standing there. Same green sweater. Same black coat draped over her arm. Same rigid posture. She was in the grass patch between the bike racks and the sidewalk, not moving, not pacing, not on her phone, just standing, looking up. Our dorm building had dozens of windows facing the courtyard. She wasn't looking around. She was looking directly at ours. Rachel let the curtain fall and backed away from the window. I stayed a few seconds longer, peeking through the edge of the fabric. The woman didn't move. It was like she was made of stone. "She followed us," I said. "That's not possible," Rachel whispered. "She couldn't know which room." "She does now," I said. We turned off the overhead light and sat on the floor, staying low. I peeked again 5 minutes later. The woman was still there. She wasn't shifting her weight or checking her watch or fidgeting with anything, just staring up, like she was trying to memorize the window, or waiting for something to happen. It didn't make any sense. We hadn't said our names in the cafe. We hadn't even spoken loudly. Our school bags had no ID tags. We hadn't parked a car. We'd walked. We stayed in that position. Lights off, curtains shut, barely breathing, for what felt like hours. Every few minutes I peeked. Every time I looked, she was still there. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, after what felt like forever, I looked again, and the space was empty. She was gone. No sign of movement, no footsteps, just the dark grass and the faint hum of the streetlight. Rachel and I sat there without speaking for a while. We checked the hallway through the peephole, then checked it again. Eventually, we turned one lamp on and kept the curtains drawn. We stayed up the whole night, watching the window. But she didn't come back. We never saw that woman again. And to this day, I have no idea who she was or what she wanted. I asked around campus if anyone else had experienced something similar, but no one had seen her before. Rachel asked the barista at the cafe a few days later, just casually, asking if a woman like that was a regular. He said he didn't recognize the description. We avoided that particular cafe for the rest of the semester, just in case she was a regular there. We didn't talk about it much after that night, but we both started keeping the curtains closed more often. We stopped studying in public for long stretches. We walked home faster, watched our surroundings more. The incident taught me to trust my instincts when someone's behavior feels threatening, even if I can't explain why. What bothered me most wasn't just the staring, but the deliberate way she followed us home and stood watching our building. Not a word, not a threat, just quiet and patient and focused, like she knew something we didn't. Some encounters with strangers leave you with more questions than answers, and sometimes that uncertainty is scarier than knowing the truth. It stays with you. That silence, that stare, that feeling of being chosen for a reason you'll never understand. It happened last fall when I was 26 and working as a programmer in Portland. I had arranged to meet some friends for an evening run at Laurelhurst Park around 9:30. I remember checking the time and realizing I'd gotten there about 30 minutes early. That was fine by me. I liked getting in a decent stretch before jogging, especially since I sat at a desk all day. Laurelhurst had pretty solid lighting along the main trails, especially the ones circling the lake. But those side paths? Way darker. After sunset, they looked almost blacked out except for the occasional lamppost. I parked near the lake like I usually did, in the little lot across from the southeast entrance, and walked over to the wooden gazebo. I always did my warm-ups there. Lunges, high knees, hamstring stretches, nothing fancy. It was nearly empty except for a couple of dog walkers staying close to the lit areas. The gazebo stood quiet, wooden boards creaking a bit underfoot. I rolled out my shoulders, did some ankle rotations, then bent down into a deep hamstring stretch, hands on the bench in front of me. That's when I heard it. Branches snapping. Not a squirrel-type noise. Heavier. More consistent. Coming from the bushes, about 20 feet away, just past where the trail dipped behind a row of overgrown hedges. I stopped mid-stretch and looked up. Sounded like someone stepping over dry twigs and rustling leaves. Not just once either, but steadily. I waited, thinking maybe it was another runner who'd cut through off-trail. I called out, "Hey, you good?" Just loud enough to be heard, not aggressive or anything. No answer. But the noise didn't stop. It kept going, just past the hedge line, a couple more branches breaking underfoot. I stayed still, eyes locked on the dark thicket. A few seconds passed, then this guy stepped out. He came out slow, like he didn't care if anyone saw him or not. His clothes were shredded, looked like they'd been through mud and God knows what else. Filthy, torn at the sleeves. A gray shirt with big dark stains, some kind of flannel tied around his waist, but it was all in pieces. He had this thick stick, more like a short branch, gripped in both hands like a bat. He started yelling. Not words exactly, more like random noise, just shouting at the top of his lungs, mouth wide open, spit flying. His face was twisted, red, like he was furious at nothing. His body was jerky, unstable, like he was barely keeping himself upright. The stick went up over his head as he kept barking out these weird half-sentences and slurred nonsense. I couldn't even tell what he was trying to say. Whatever he was on, or if he was just totally gone mentally, it had him worked up into some kind of rage. I took a slow step back, hands up, nothing threatening. I didn't want to turn my back yet. "All right, man," I said, just to fill the silence. "I'm leaving. It's all good." I moved back toward the main path, careful, measured. But he didn't stay put. He moved forward, matched my steps. Not fast, but direct. He didn't stop yelling either. His voice bounced between shouting gibberish and heavy breathing, like he was running out of steam but didn't know how to quit. Every time I stepped back, he followed. His grip on the stick got tighter. His knuckles were scraped, like he'd fallen or been fighting something. I kept both my hands where he could see them, still trying not to provoke him. He came out of the bushes like he had nothing to lose. I didn't want to find out if that meant he was ready to use that stick. I looked back once, quick glance, and saw we were still a good 20 feet from the main trail. Nobody in sight. No more dog walkers. Just trees and gravel and that wide path ahead of me, dark on both sides. He was still coming. I kept moving backward, every step dragging the space between us thinner. I picked up my walking speed, heading toward the parking area where the streetlights were brighter and the shadows didn't seem to stretch so far. The man kept after me, getting louder and more frantic. I could hear him behind me, the clack of his stick against the pavement, his voice cracking as he yelled. I still couldn't make out most of what he was saying, but some of the words started sounding like they were aimed at me directly. "You think I don't know?" he shouted, voice hoarse. "You followed me here. I saw you." I'd never seen this guy before in my life, but whatever was going on in his head, he had decided I was part of it. I tried to stay calm and just kept moving fast, hoping he would stop, hoping someone else would show up. But nobody else was around. No joggers, no dog walkers anymore. Just trees and cold air and the sound of this guy chasing me. When I realized he wasn't slowing down and was actually picking up speed, I started to run. I didn't look back again. I could hear him crashing through the bushes, maybe cutting across the grass to get closer. I wasn't out of shape, but my legs felt heavy and stiff from the earlier stretching. My shoes pounded against the pavement as I aimed for the only thing that mattered: my car. It sat under a streetlight, maybe 100 yards ahead, but it felt like a mile. I reached for my keys as I ran, trying to fumble the fob out of my pocket while keeping my pace steady. He was still behind me. I could hear him gasping, yelling, the thump of his stick hitting something, maybe the side of a trash bin or one of the metal trail signs. I didn't turn around to see. I just ran harder. I reached my car with maybe 10 seconds to spare. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys once. I scooped them up and hit the unlock button, yanked open the door, and dove inside. I slammed it shut, hit the lock again, and just sat there for half a second breathing like I'd sprinted a mile uphill. Then I looked up. The man was still coming. He hadn't stopped. He ran at me full tilt, stopping only when he got about 15 feet from my front bumper. His face was red and raw looking in the harsh light. He was still yelling, waving the stick around in one hand like he couldn't decide if he was going to throw it or not. I didn't wait to find out. I hit the ignition, put the car in reverse, and backed up a few feet just to create space between us. He didn't follow. He just stood there, screaming, pacing in a small circle with jerky steps. I picked up my phone and called 911, tried to explain everything clearly, but my voice shook so much I had to repeat myself twice. The dispatcher told me to stay in the car and wait. Police were on the way. I kept the engine running and my doors locked. He was still there 5 minutes later, yelling at nothing. Then he turned suddenly and walked back into the trees. When the patrol car finally pulled up, about 10 minutes after I made the call, I waved them over. The officers got out, asked me to describe everything, which I did in as much detail as I could. One of them nodded and said they'd gotten similar reports recently. I asked if they were going to search the park. The younger cop told me they would, but they weren't expecting to find him tonight. He moved fast, and the park was bigger than it seemed in the dark. I sat there a while longer after they left, just trying to slow my heart rate down. Then I texted my friends. Not coming. Something happened. I'll explain later. The next morning, I got a call from one of the officers. He told me they'd found the man, curled up under an overpass about a mile from the park. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he'd been reported. He was known to the local mental health team and had been slipping through the cracks for months. They got him into a treatment facility that day. Said he'd been off his meds and hadn't eaten properly in a while. He thought people were after him. He thought the park was some kind of trap. It wasn't comforting. I mean, I was glad he wasn't dead, and I didn't want to see anyone like that just vanish into the system again. But the reality stuck with me. How fast something normal could slide into something terrifying. 1 minute I was stretching under a gazebo, thinking about what to eat after the run, and the next I was sprinting to my car because someone had decided I was part of their delusion. I never went back to Laurelhurst at night after that. Not because I thought he'd be there again. He probably wasn't even allowed back. But because now I knew how thin the line was. Some people aren't monsters. They're not calculating or evil or even aware of what they're doing. But they can still be dangerous. And it doesn't matter what their intent is when they're chasing you with a stick in the dark. Since then, I keep my routines tighter. I don't wait alone in quiet places, even in public parks. Not because I'm paranoid, just because now I understand how fragile normal really is. I was working the graveyard shift at the Roadstar Diner on Interstate 40, somewhere between Memphis and Nashville. The place ran 24 hours, mostly serving truckers and tired road trippers. From 11 at night to 7 in the morning, it was just me on the grill and register until Jennifer Rose showed up at 4. Tuesdays were usually slow, quiet enough to hear the humming of the fridge compressor in the back and the occasional thump of a semi's engine idling outside. It was around 1:30 in the morning when the door creaked open and this man came in. He had to be about mid-40s, maybe pushing 50, wearing a beat-up Carhartt jacket and a baseball cap low over his face. He walked slow, one foot dragging a little, like his leg was stiff or injured. I figured maybe he was just exhausted. People came in looking rough sometimes. He came up to the counter and didn't say much, just mumbled, "Burger. Fries." His voice was flat, dull, like he hadn't spoken in hours. Never looked up. Just stood there with one hand covering the left side of his jacket, like he was hiding something underneath. My eyes went to his boots, muddy, worn out. Then I noticed the dark patches on his pants, just above the knee. I thought it might be grease or oil, but the way the light caught it, it looked darker, wetter than that. As I turned to fire up the grill, I glanced at the floor. That's when I saw them. Dark red drops, leading in a broken trail from the door to where he stood. They weren't smears. They were drops. A few had splashed slightly when they hit the tile. Not many, maybe 7 or 8, but enough to be noticed if you were paying attention. I kept my back turned, watching him in the reflection of the metal above the grill. He wasn't moving, just standing there, his hands still pressed against his jacket. His breathing was weird, too shallow, uneven. It was like he was holding back a cough or trying not to make any noise at all. Then he rocked slightly on his feet, like he was dizzy. I could see the sway in the corner of the reflection. I started cooking. I didn't want to spook him. I took a breath, wiped my hands on a towel, and told him, "Need to grab some seasoning from the back." He didn't answer. I didn't wait. I stepped into the storage room, closed the swinging door halfway, and picked up the landline. The line rang once before the operator answered. I whispered, "Yeah, this is Roadstar off 40. Some guy just walked in, bleeding bad. He's not saying anything, just standing there." The dispatcher asked if he was armed. I said I couldn't see anything, but he was holding his jacket tight like he might be hiding something. She told me to stay calm, keep him there if I could, and that someone was en route. I told her I'd try. I put the phone down and went back out. The guy was still there, still hadn't sat down. His eyes were open but blank, unfocused, like he wasn't seeing the counter or the ketchup bottle or the little menu I had taped to the napkin holder. He was seeing something else. Somewhere else. I turned the burger, dropped the fries in the oil. He didn't flinch at the sizzle. Blood was dripping from his elbow now, slow but steady. It pooled under his boot and started inching toward the leg of the stool he was next to. The whole time, not a word from him. Not even a cough or a shift in posture. He didn't seem to care. Or maybe he couldn't care anymore. I worked slower than usual. The smell of grease and meat filled the air. He just stared at the salt shaker like he didn't recognize it. Like he was waiting for something, not food. Something else. I kept one hand near the grill scraper, just in case. He never moved. Never sat. Just stood there, bleeding onto my tile floor. 12 minutes later, the front door creaked open, and 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. They moved quickly, eyes sweeping the room. The bleeding man turned his head toward them, and something in him shifted. His body stiffened, eyes widening, and for the first time he looked directly at someone. The second he recognized them as police, he took a clumsy step backward, his hands still gripping his jacket, trying to retreat toward the booths. He stumbled into one of the stools and almost lost his balance. One officer started talking calmly, stepping toward him. "Sir, stay right there. You're injured." The man didn't respond, just turned and tried to run toward the exit. But his legs gave out almost immediately. He dropped hard, his body hitting the tile with a dull thud. Blood spread out beneath him in a slow, thick pool. He didn't move again. The officers rushed forward and knelt beside him. One checked his pulse while the other radioed it in. I stood there frozen with a spatula in my hand. Within a few minutes, red and blue lights lit up the windows, and a paramedic crew came through the door with a stretcher. They worked fast, checking his vitals, securing his limbs, and lifting him up with quiet urgency. As they wheeled him out, an officer turned to me. "Did you call it in?" "Yeah," I said. "He came in like that, ordered food, didn't say much, just stood there bleeding." "You probably saved his life. Honestly." The officer glanced down at the smeared floor. "We've been looking for someone matching that description. You did the right thing." I nodded. He handed me a clipboard and asked a few more questions. What time he came in, what he said, how he acted. I told them everything I remembered. The officer jotted it all down, thanked me again, then left. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up blood from the floor, the counter, the stool legs. Jennifer came in at 4 like always and raised her eyebrows when she saw the towels in the sink and the drying streaks across the tile. I didn't say much. She didn't ask much either. Just before sunrise, with the place quiet again, I finished wiping the last corner and threw the rag in the bin. My arms were tired, but my mind was wired, too alert to rest. The smell of iron still hung faint in the air no matter how much bleach I used. Around lunchtime the next day, I was back for a double shift when a plainclothed detective came through the door. He showed me his badge and asked to talk. I led him to the side booth by the window and poured him a coffee while he pulled out a small notebook. He told me the man had been in a fight at a bar 15 miles east of us. A knife fight. 1 man dead. The guy who came into my diner had been stabbed twice, once in the stomach and once near the shoulder blade. Deep wounds. He probably should have bled out in his car, but instead of going to a hospital or hiding, he'd driven straight to us in a stolen vehicle. The detective said they found the car outside, engine still warm. The keys were on the floorboard. The man's wallet had someone else's ID, but they eventually confirmed his name. No priors. Worked construction. No known history of violence. Just an argument in a parking lot that got out of control. The dead man had pulled a blade first, according to witnesses. But the guy who walked into my diner finished it, then fled. He was in shock, the detective said. Physically and mentally. Probably didn't even realize how bad he was hurt. "Why come here?" I asked. He shrugged. "Survival mode." You fall back on routine. Some part of him was just hungry, or maybe cold, or scared. Sometimes shock makes people act normal while they're dying. I sat back in the booth. The guy had stood right in front of me, blood soaking through his clothes, and calmly ordered a burger like it was any other night. They're charging him with second-degree murder. Once he's stable enough to get moved, he'll be held without bail. The detective thanked me for cooperating and left his card, in case I remembered anything else. I stuck the card on the bulletin board behind the counter and didn't touch it again. The months rolled by. I kept working at Roadstar, but something about those nights felt different. Jennifer said I was jumpier. I scanned every person who came through the door, looking for signs. Blood, twitchy movements, hidden hands. I couldn't help it. That image stuck with me. The blank face, the hand pressed to his jacket, the red trail on the tile. I didn't quit the job. Not right away. But I never looked at it the same again. The idea that someone could be bleeding out, dying, after committing a violent crime, and still walk into a diner and ask for fries, that rattled something loose in me. Most nights passed quietly, just truckers and road-weary couples and the occasional drunk college kid. But I always kept an eye out, one hand never far from the phone. Every customer who lingered too long or didn't talk enough set off something low in my gut. Jennifer said I was being paranoid. Maybe I was. But she hadn't been there that night. You can't unsee something like that. A man on autopilot, too far gone to feel pain, ordering a meal like it was a regular Tuesday. I realized then that the real danger doesn't always come from the loud ones, the ones who yell and break things. Sometimes it comes from the ones who are already broken, who don't even know how far gone they are. When someone's body is bleeding and their brain is slipping into survival mode, all bets are off. They might act normal, they might smile, they might ask for ketchup while dripping all over the counter. You won't know until it's too late. That was my last winter at Roadstar. I gave notice in March and moved out of state by summer. Found a new job. Something quieter. But I still check the floor when I walk into diners. Still watch people's hands. Still think about that night. And I still don't eat burgers after midnight. I was working late at the office in San Jose that night, trying to wrap up a presentation for a client meeting the next morning. It was one of those nights where the building gets quiet around 8, and by 10, you feel like you're the only person alive in a 10-story cube farm. I left just after midnight, a little buzzed from too much coffee and not enough food, and got on Highway 101 heading south. The road was practically deserted, just a few headlights way ahead, and the occasional big rig humming past in the opposite lane. About 15 minutes into the drive, the engine light on my dashboard blinked on. I didn't panic at first. I figured maybe the oil was low or the sensor was glitching. Then I noticed the engine temperature was climbing fast and I started losing power. I pulled over onto the shoulder and the car died completely as I coasted to a stop. The whole thing shut off like someone flipped a switch. I turned the key a few times, but nothing. No crank, no click. Dead. I stepped out, clicked on my flashlight, and popped the hood. The air smelled hot and metallic, like boiling coolant. I leaned over and scanned the engine. One of the hoses, the one near the top of the radiator, was cut. Not frayed, not burst. It looked like someone had sliced it with a razor. The ends were clean. Too clean. I stood there for a few seconds just staring at it, trying to wrap my head around how that could have happened without me noticing. That's when I saw headlights sweep across the inside of my car. I turned, expecting maybe a highway patrol unit or a tow truck already dispatched by the app. Instead, an old pickup truck rolled to a stop a few feet behind my car. It was a beat-up, boxy thing. Dark red or maybe brown, hard to tell under the sodium lights. Both doors opened at once. Two guys got out. They looked like they worked construction or maybe HVAC. Worn boots, canvas jackets, thick work gloves. The tall one had tattoos from wrist to shoulder, and I could see the ink even from the glare of my flashlight. He walked with a kind of bounce, like he was amped up. The other guy was shorter and heavier, with a dark beard that almost covered his neck. Neither of them smiled. The tall one spoke first. "Need a hand with that?" I straightened up and stepped back. "App's sending a tow. Should be here soon." The bearded guy walked past me and looked under the hood, uninvited. "Hose is cut," he said, like it was news to me. "You can't drive it like that." I nodded. "Yeah, I know." They didn't leave. The tall one leaned against my passenger door, looking down into the window like he was checking the inside. The bearded guy closed my hood without asking. I stepped back toward the driver's side door, already feeling uneasy. I wasn't scared yet, not really. Just alert. Something wasn't right about them. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't offer a phone or even mention calling anyone. They just lingered. "We can give you a ride," the tall one said. "There's a motel about 5 miles back, cleaner than most." I shook my head. "I'm good. I'll wait for the truck." They didn't like that. I could feel it in the way the bearded guy looked at the other one. A silent pause, then a quick nod like they'd already talked this through. I got in my car and locked the doors, still trying to stay calm, still telling myself maybe they were just weird about helping strangers. The tall guy started walking around the car, checking the door handles, even trying the rear passenger side like maybe I'd forgotten to lock it. I watched him through the mirrors. The bearded guy went back to their truck. I leaned over to the passenger seat and grabbed my phone. 1 bar. The 911 call didn't even ring before it dropped. I looked up and saw the bearded guy talking into a radio. Not a phone, an actual two-way radio with a long antenna. He was scanning the highway while he spoke, pacing slowly, like he was waiting for something. I started the emergency call again. This time it rang once, then cut out. Still no connection. I kept the doors locked and the windows up, hoping the tow would show soon. But I knew now, without a doubt, that this wasn't a coincidence. My car hadn't just broken down. Someone had cut that hose, and these guys weren't here to help. The tall guy kept circling the car, slower now, like he was trying to wear me down. Every couple of steps, he'd yank at the door handle just enough to make the locks rattle. Then he'd lean close to the glass and tap it with one knuckle. Not hard, not loud, just enough to make me flinch. His partner had gone back to the truck and opened the bed. I couldn't see what he pulled out, but I heard the scrape of metal on metal. He slammed the tailgate closed and stood behind their truck, silhouetted in the red glow of their taillights. Both of them were glancing up the road more than they were looking at me. They were waiting. That's when it really clicked. These guys weren't improvising. This wasn't about helping or even just robbing me. There was timing involved. Like they knew someone else was coming or something had to be done before they could make their move. I kept my hands tight around my phone and tried not to look like I was watching every move they made. The tall one came back to my window, squatted down, and said something I couldn't hear through the glass. Then he smiled and stood up again, stretching his arms like he was getting ready for something. I kept scanning the mirror. A flash of light behind me made me think I was imagining things, but a few seconds later, real headlights crept over the horizon in the opposite lane. They moved fast, then slowed. Red and blue lights lit up behind the pickup, and I saw the word "patrol" stenciled on the side of the cruiser that rolled to a stop right behind them. The two men didn't speak, didn't even look back at me. They just turned and walked to their truck, climbing in like none of this was a big deal. The officer stepped out of his car, one hand resting near his hip, the other shining a flashlight across both vehicles. He came to my window first. I rolled it down just enough to hear him. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded fast. "Yeah, car broke down. They showed up right after. Won't leave." He looked toward their truck, then back at me. "Sit tight." He walked to the pickup and started talking to them. I watched the tall guy shrug and gesture back at my car like none of this was weird. The officer's stance changed. He straightened up, reached for his radio, and took a step back. Then I heard him say something into his mic. He came back a minute later. "They say they were just helping," he said. "But the truck they're driving's stolen. just ran the plates. He didn't say anything else before walking back and ordering them out of the vehicle. They didn't argue. The bearded guy put his hands up and stepped out first. The tall one followed a few seconds later. Backup arrived a minute after that. Another cruiser with 2 more officers. The men were cuffed and separated. I stayed in the car the whole time, gripping the steering wheel, trying not to shake. The officer who'd first pulled up came back and said they'd arrested both of them on the spot. They had warrants: armed robbery, stolen vehicles, attempted kidnapping. He said I was lucky. That part stuck with me. I hadn't done anything smart. I hadn't escaped or fought them off. I'd just gotten lucky. While we waited for the tow truck he called, he told me this stretch of highway had been seeing more of these kinds of cases. It was a pattern. The attackers would tamper with cars parked at gas stations or parking garages, cutting belts, loosening clamps, things that wouldn't fail until the driver was alone and miles from help. Then they'd follow the victim in their own vehicle and wait for them to break down. He said a few people had lost their cars, wallets, phones. One driver was still missing. Another had been found weeks later in a drainage culvert, dead from blunt force trauma. The tow truck showed up about 20 minutes later. The driver hooked up my car while the officers gave me their contact info and asked if I'd be willing to talk to detectives later. I said yes. Anything they needed. The next day, I had the car towed to a shop near my apartment. They checked everything: cooling system, radiator, hoses, clamps. The mechanic pointed out fresh scratches around the top hose where it connected to the engine block. It hadn't burst from wear or heat. Someone had pried the clamp loose and partially sliced the rubber with a clean blade. It was designed to hold just long enough, then fail. I thought back to the parking garage. I'd stayed late at the office, and most of the lights had gone off by 8:30. Cameras were limited to the entrances. Anyone could have walked in from the street or tailgated behind a car through the security gate. I'd never thought about that before. Never even looked around as I walked to my spot. After that night, I started checking my vehicle every time I left work. Under the hood, under the car, even the tires. I switched up my parking spots and started leaving through different exits. It felt paranoid, but the cops told me I wasn't the only one. That same group, those 2 guys and probably others, had done the same thing to multiple drivers. Always late at night. Always someone alone. The detective I spoke to a week later said they were part of a small crew tied to a chop shop operation out in Modesto. They didn't just want the cars. They used the driver to access bank apps, PINs, and credentials. One guy had been held for hours while they emptied his accounts. Another was beaten and left on a service road with a concussion and no memory of what happened. Both of the men who tried to grab me pled out. 15 years each. No trial. The DA had more than enough. The stolen truck, the tools in the bed, the radio scanner, and their prints on vehicles tied to at least 6 other cases. That stretch of Highway 101 looked the same for weeks afterward, but I didn't. I couldn't drive it without thinking about that night. I started keeping a flashlight in my glove box and a folding knife under my seat. I changed my routine. I watched every car that followed me too long. Sometimes I still do. The truth is, predators don't jump out from the shadows anymore. They wait. They plan. They let your guard down for you. And then they step in smiling, offering help, acting normal, until you say no. And that's when the real danger begins. I finished my shift at the auto shop on Elm Street around 11:30 p.m. The place was dead quiet by the time I locked up. I was greasy, exhausted, and starving. I didn't feel like going home just yet, so I figured I'd swing by the 24-hour food mart for some stuff I needed anyway. Milk, bread, a couple frozen meals. Nothing major. That late, the store was mostly empty except for two teenage girls whispering near the soda aisle and a tired-looking guy in a hoodie checking out batteries by the electronics wall. I grabbed a cart and started in the canned foods section. After a few minutes, I noticed a guy in a denim jacket standing at the end of the aisle. He didn't have a basket or anything in his hands. Just standing there, staring at the soup labels. Didn't think much of it. People kill time in weird ways. I moved over to the bakery section, grabbed a pack of bagels, and noticed him again. This time he was by the display of donuts, flipping through a coupon booklet. Still no basket, no groceries. He looked like he hadn't bought a thing. I turned and went to dairy, trying to shake a weird itch at the back of my neck. When I reached for the milk, I caught him in the reflection of the cooler door. There he was again, behind me, pretending to read the label on a tub of margarine. I closed the door harder than I meant to. After that, I decided to test something. I went across the store to frozen foods. It's a long walk through 3 rows of shelving, plus the wide cleaning supply aisle. I stopped by the freezer section and grabbed a box of lasagna, waiting. Sure enough, denim jacket guy showed up less than a minute later. No cart, no items. Just him, leaning against the opposite freezer, watching me. He never looked me in the eyes, always sideways, always hanging just far enough away to not be obvious. By now, I wasn't even really pretending to shop. I started taking long routes, circling aisles to see if he'd follow. He did. Quiet steps, always just outside my peripheral vision. Never touching a single product. The guy wasn't lost. He wasn't browsing. He was following me. I ended up back in the produce section near the front of the store. There were 2 employees chatting near the registers, so I lingered by the bananas, trying to look casual while keeping them in sight. When I glanced around the corner, he was by the lettuce, thumbing a head of romaine with one hand and looking directly at me with the other half of his face still turned away. I made a quick move and headed to the front. There was a cashier I vaguely recognized, Michelle. She was ringing up some gum and energy drinks for a guy in pajama pants. I wheeled my cart into the next lane and pretended to look for my wallet. Denim jacket guy didn't come up behind me, but I could see him in the corner of my eye again. By the floral display, fake checking out a rack of discounted greeting cards. I got to Michelle and started unloading the cart. Halfway through, I realized I didn't have my bank card on me. My stomach dropped. It was in my glove box, left there during lunch. I looked at her and said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I left my card in my truck. Can you hold this here a minute?" She smiled and said, "No problem. Just come right back." I left the cart and walked briskly through the sliding doors, the buzz of the lights outside suddenly a lot louder in my ears. My truck was parked 3 rows out, under one of those busted parking lot lights that flickered every few seconds. As I crossed toward it, I noticed someone crouched down by the driver's side. I froze mid-step. It was the same guy. He had one hand under my door handle, and the other tucked into the bottom edge of the door frame. At first I thought maybe he'd dropped keys or something, but when I got closer, I saw it wasn't that. He wasn't searching for anything. He was doing something under my door, messing with it. He stood up when he saw me coming and gave a sheepish laugh. "Hey, you from around here? I'm trying to find the nearest gas station. My phone died." I kept walking toward him but slowed down. He didn't look at me fully, still half turned away. The same posture, the same half-hidden face. His voice was casual, but his body was too stiff. His hands were still at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them now. I said, "No idea. I just work around here," and gestured toward the truck. "I need to grab something." He didn't move at first. Then he took one step back, but not enough. still too close to the driver's door, still looking at me like he was waiting for something. I stopped about 3 feet away. "Can I help you?" I asked, more direct this time. He took another half step back and said again, "Just trying to find a gas station. I'm not from here." I opened the passenger door instead of the driver's, reached across into the glove box, and pulled out my wallet. When I straightened up, he was still standing there, now pretending to look at the sky like he was gauging the weather. I didn't say anything else. I shut the door hard and walked around to the back of the truck. I didn't turn my back to him until I had clear space behind me. As I walked back toward the store, I glanced over my shoulder once. He was still standing by my truck, now slowly walking around to the back of it. Not away, not toward another car, just circling mine. I walked faster. That's when I noticed a second person emerge from between the parked cars on the other side of my truck. He was moving slowly, like he didn't want to draw attention, but his steps were too precise. Not a drunk guy wandering around or someone heading to their vehicle. This guy knew exactly where he was going, straight for me. He was bigger than the denim jacket guy, wearing black from head to toe, even a dark beanie that covered most of his face. The way he positioned himself at the back of my truck made it obvious. He was there to cut me off. It clicked instantly. This wasn't random. They'd been following me, watching me from the minute I entered the store, waiting for the right moment. The denim jacket guy was the front man, the one to keep me distracted and in place. The second guy was moving in from behind to close the trap. My truck was parked far from the entrance, in a dark patch where the overhead lights were flickering. No witnesses, no traffic, no security. I'd walked right into it. I glanced over my shoulder toward the store, calculating how far I'd have to sprint. They'd picked their spot perfectly, just far enough that shouting wouldn't immediately get anyone's attention. I turned to the first guy, who hadn't moved. He was watching me closely, like waiting to see if I'd panic. The second man stopped at the tailgate. No one said a word. I felt a cold weight drop into my gut. These guys weren't just looking to take my truck. They were planning something else. Instead of running or freezing, I went for the only option left. I screamed, as loud as I could. "Help! Robbery! Help me! Somebody help!" My voice echoed across the parking lot, cutting through the silence and bouncing off car windows. I didn't stop. I kept yelling, louder each time, until I felt my throat strain. Both guys jolted. Denim jacket guy stepped back, hands half raised, not saying anything. His partner froze for a second, then turned sharply toward the side alley between vehicles. They didn't expect noise. They expected fear, silence, obedience. I kept shouting, "Help! They're trying to rob me!" And that's when the store doors slammed open, and Dennis, the overnight security guard, came running out. I'd seen him around before. Older guy, thin build, wore a jacket too big for him, but carried himself like he meant business. He came straight for me, flashlight out, yelling, "What's going on?" Both men bolted, one toward the back of the lot, the other weaving between parked cars. Dennis chased a few steps, then stopped near my truck when he noticed something lying on the ground. He waved me over as I stood shaking near the driver door. Did they take anything? No. But they were trying to. They were waiting for me. He didn't ask more, just pointed to the bag they'd dropped, a small black duffel with the zipper half open. Inside were plastic zip ties, a pair of gloves, and what looked like a bundle of lockpicks wrapped in cloth. Dennis cursed under his breath and told me to call the police. They arrived in less than 10 minutes. 2 officers took my statement while another examined the truck for tampering. I told them everything. The guy in the denim jacket inside the store, how he followed me, how the second one popped out just as I reached my truck. The older of the 2 officers nodded like he'd heard this before. "We've had a string of these lately," he said. "Carjackings mostly. But with the zip ties, this might have gone further." "What do you mean, gone further?" He paused. "Some of these crews aren't just looking for cars. They use zip ties to restrain people, sometimes to throw them in the back seat and drive off. You did the right thing making noise. That probably saved you." I didn't say anything. Just looked around the parking lot, the empty rows of cars, the flickering lights, the shadows they disappeared into. Later that week, a detective followed up with me at the shop. He showed me stills from the store's security footage. The first guy had followed me through nearly every aisle, lingering near me, always just behind a display or pretending to browse. The second guy stayed outside most of the time, only entering briefly and keeping out of view. They were never close together on camera. They'd practiced this. A setup, planned in detail. The detective said other people had reported similar setups in grocery store lots around the city. Always at night, always in dimly lit areas. They waited until the person was isolated, far from other shoppers. Most people didn't scream. Most people gave up their keys or got forced into the car. "You were the first to make enough noise to draw security before anything happened," the detective said. That stayed with me. Not because I was proud of it, but because it meant the others weren't so lucky. I moved after that. Started parking right near the store doors no matter how far I had to walk inside. I watched for people more, checked reflections, glanced behind me at every aisle. Not paranoia, just habit now. I keep thinking about the fact that I wasn't supposed to be at Food Mart that night. I almost skipped it, but I went. And they were ready, which means they'd probably been waiting for anyone. Not me specifically. Just someone distracted, someone alone, someone who didn't scream. Last spring, I went to Yellowstone for a weekend photography assignment, hoping to get some wildlife shots for a nature magazine. I'd only done a few small freelance pieces before that, so this felt like a big step up. I got there late Friday afternoon, figured I'd set up at Trout Lake because I'd heard good things, and it wasn't as crowded as some of the other spots. When I arrived, there were 2 families with kids running around, roasting marshmallows, playing near the water. It seemed like a good vibe, normal camping stuff. I didn't interact with anyone, just nodded at a dad who passed by with a fishing pole and got to work setting up my tent. By the time the sun was dipping below the trees, the families had packed up. It surprised me a little since it was still early in the season, but maybe they were just out for a short trip. Either way, I ended up totally alone by the lake, which was perfect for getting the kind of shots I wanted. The place went quiet fast. Just wind, frogs, and the occasional bird. I was cooking dinner on my small portable stove, just heating up some freeze-dried pasta, when I noticed someone across the water. He was standing just past the reeds on the opposite shore, facing directly at me. At first, I assumed it was another hiker or camper, maybe scoping out a spot, but then I realized he wasn't moving. He stood completely still, wearing full camo, jacket, pants, and even a hat. Hard to see at first, but once I spotted him, I couldn't unsee it. What made it weird wasn't just that he was staring. It was that he had binoculars up to his face, pointed directly at me. I raised my hand, kind of a wave, more out of reflex than anything. The second our eyes met through the distance, he dropped the binoculars and stepped back into the woods without a sound. Just vanished. I waited a few seconds, watching the trees, but he didn't come back out. I wasn't scared exactly, but I definitely felt thrown off. The way he was watching me wasn't like a bird watcher or another photographer. He wasn't scanning the trees or the water. He was locked in on my campsite the entire time. I sat for a while after dinner, scanning the opposite tree line while pretending to read. It felt too early to go to sleep, but I didn't want to walk away from my gear. Eventually, the light faded completely, and I packed everything up, double-checked my food container to make sure it was sealed and away from the tent, then zipped myself inside. I wasn't thinking about the man much anymore. I chalked it up to a weird moment and figured he had probably hiked along the ridge and was gone by now. I started to relax. I read for a bit by headlamp, then turned it off and lay back listening to the normal night sounds. Wind through the trees, small rustles in the brush, water gently lapping at the rocks. All normal. I was starting to drift off when I heard something that didn't fit. It was subtle at first, like shuffling steps on dry grass. I told myself it was probably a raccoon or a deer nosing around the fire pit. But then the sound got closer. It wasn't the skittering of small animals. It was slower, heavier, controlled. Like someone trying not to make noise. I slowly reached for my flashlight but didn't turn it on yet. I sat up inside the tent and looked through the mesh window, but I couldn't see anything in the dark. Then I heard it again, closer. Something rustling right outside, near my backpack that I had left next to a log by the cold fire pit. I unzipped the tent flap just an inch and peered out. That's when I saw him. Same camo outfit, same hat. He was crouched over my gear, going through it quietly like he'd done it before. He wasn't in a rush. His movements were deliberate, like he knew exactly what he was looking for. I could barely breathe. He pulled something from my backpack. I couldn't see what, but he pocketed it and then kept digging through the side pouch. I still hadn't turned on my flashlight. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I didn't move, he wouldn't notice me. Or maybe I just didn't want him to know I was watching. He didn't look around. He never glanced at my tent, even though I could see the angle he was crouched at meant he'd have to know where I was. But he kept ignoring it, like I wasn't there. Like he was confident I wouldn't interrupt him. I stayed completely still, holding the flashlight in my hand, not turning it on. Part of me wanted to confront him, yell, make noise, scare him off. But something about the way he moved told me that wouldn't work. He was calm. Too calm. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't desperate. He'd waited until the forest was completely silent. Until he thought I was asleep. Until no one else was around. When I couldn't stand watching him steal my stuff any longer, I shouted and switched on my high-powered flashlight. The beam hit him directly in the face. He jerked back, clearly startled, and dropped my camera onto the dirt with a sharp clack. His hand reached toward his jacket, but then he turned and bolted into the woods without a word. I stayed kneeling in the tent opening, light still scanning the trees, listening to the sound of his feet crashing through brush until it disappeared. Then silence. I didn't chase after him. I zipped the tent shut and just sat there, holding the flashlight in one hand and my camp knife in the other. My heart didn't slow down for what felt like an hour. Every sound outside sent a jolt through my chest. At one point, I thought I saw movement behind the trees, but I wasn't sure. I didn't sleep. I just sat upright with the flashlight pointed at the tent entrance until the sky finally started to lighten. When it was bright enough to see, I crawled out and walked around my camp. My camera was on the ground, the lens cracked straight through. My backpack had been rifled through completely. Some snack bars, my headlamp, and a pocket knife were gone. Worse, my wallet and car keys were missing. I tore through everything twice, but they were definitely gone. That meant I was stuck at Trout Lake with no way to drive out. My phone showed no service, just like the night before. I knew the nearest ranger station was several miles away. probably 3 or 4 hours on foot, depending on how direct the trail was. I stuffed what I could carry into my day pack: water bottle, remaining food, first aid kit, spare batteries, and left the rest. I kept my flashlight in hand, even though the sun was up. I didn't want to leave, but staying felt worse. I kept imagining him waiting somewhere nearby, watching again. The hike out was quiet, but tense. I didn't see anyone else, not even a hiker passing by. I stuck to the trail but kept scanning the woods. Every broken twig or bird song made me pause. I kept thinking he might try to follow me, or that he'd moved ahead during the night to cut me off. But I never saw him. Just empty trees, the crunch of dirt under my boots, and the sound of my own breath. It took 3 hours to reach the ranger station. The place looked like a small wooden office on the edge of a gravel lot, surrounded by service trucks. I knocked and went straight in. The ranger behind the desk saw my face and asked if I was okay before I could say anything. I told him I wasn't hurt, but I needed help. I explained everything: the man across the lake, the late-night theft, the missing keys and wallet. His name tag said Martinez. Martinez called for backup on his radio, asked me to sit, then started writing everything down. He didn't act surprised, which put me on edge again. After asking a few questions about the man's clothes and behavior, he said, "We've had a few reports like this recently. Same description. Solo female campers mostly." I asked if they'd caught him. He shook his head. "Not yet, but you're not the first." He said over the last month, several women camping alone had experienced the same thing. Someone watching their campsite from a distance, then returning at night to either snoop around or steal. Some had seen him. Others just noticed their things were disturbed or missing. Always wearing camouflage. Always disappearing before rangers could respond. Later that afternoon, a team of rangers went back out to Trout Lake to search the area. Martinez offered to drive me back to the lot where my car was parked, and I accepted. I waited inside the station while they combed the area near my site. About 2 hours later, Martinez got a call and turned to me. "We found your stuff." They'd located an abandoned cabin about 2 miles from where I'd camped. Inside, they found my wallet, my car keys, and my stolen items, minus the cash. There were also other backpacks, pieces of clothing, even some small electronics, all hidden under a tarp inside. It wasn't just my things. This guy had clearly done it before. Martinez drove me over to the cabin. It was nothing more than a collapsing structure hidden off a faded trail, roof half caved in, broken furniture pushed into the corners. The inside smelled like damp wood and unwashed clothes. Someone had been living there. Sleeping bag on the floor, food wrappers scattered near the hearth, a makeshift stove set up using a metal canister and bricks. The air felt wrong, heavy, like we'd just missed him. They found my car keys under a pile of leaves near the back wall, like he'd meant to keep them hidden. My wallet was tucked into an old backpack, cards still inside, cash gone. Martinez told me they'd bag everything and run prints if they could. But he didn't sound hopeful. Whoever this was knew how to stay off-grid. No IDs, no phone, no traceable gear. Just camouflage and silence. Even after finding my things, the feeling didn't go away. I was glad to get my car back, but I kept thinking about how close he'd been. How long he might have been watching me. Maybe since I arrived. Maybe before. The police opened an investigation but never caught him. They found more reports from other parks nearby. Solo women, stolen gear, empty shelters where someone had clearly been squatting. Always the same description. Male, late 30s or 40s, lean, dressed in camo, never speaking, never confronting anyone directly. It took me a long time to feel okay camping again. I replaced my camera, but I stopped taking solo assignments. Now I only go out in groups, and I stay in busy campgrounds, never more than a short walk from other people. I lock my gear up when I sleep. I don't leave valuables unattended. I don't assume I'm alone, even when the place feels empty. That weekend at Trout Lake should have been about wildlife photography. A quiet job. Simple. But the woods aren't always empty. The threat isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the guy standing still in the distance, staring through binoculars. Sometimes it's the footsteps you don't hear until it's too late. I thought I knew how to handle myself in the wilderness. I was wrong. When I was a detective, eviction calls were usually straightforward. The bailiffs would show up, people would argue, maybe throw some furniture around, but eventually they'd leave. Most tenants didn't want a police record, so even the loud ones would calm down eventually. I got called to Maple Street because 29-year-old Belinda Harris had barricaded herself inside after the final notice. The neighbors had been complaining about screaming and weird noises from her apartment for weeks. Said she'd been throwing stuff at the walls, yelling at nobody. When I arrived, the bailiffs were standing outside looking frustrated. They told me Belinda was shouting threats through the door and refused to come out. One of them said she'd been yelling since 7 a.m. and hadn't stopped except to blast the TV. The neighbors mentioned she'd waved a kitchen knife around when the utility workers came by to cut her power. I figured it would be another hour of talking someone down. The building was old. Brick and plaster, narrow hallway, dim bulbs in the ceiling, and the kind of carpet that never looked clean no matter how often it got vacuumed. Belinda's unit was third on the left. As I walked up, I heard her through the door. Voice hoarse, screaming stuff like, "You're not getting in! You're working with them!" The "them" part wasn't specific. It usually isn't in cases like this. I knocked once and called out to her, just introduced myself and said I wasn't there to hurt her. She responded with, "Liar, you're in on it too." I kept talking, stayed calm, tried not to provoke. 30 minutes passed like that. The locksmith had already been called, and by the time he arrived, the tension had gone up a notch. Belinda had stopped shouting and switched to mumbling. I pressed my ear to the door and heard her pacing. The bailiff stayed down the hall, arms crossed, watching. I told the locksmith to go ahead. He worked fast, was inside the lock mechanism within a minute. I kept speaking through the door while he worked, trying to keep her focused on me. "No one wants to hurt you. We just need to talk. That's all." She didn't respond. The click of the door unlocking sounded too loud in that quiet hallway. As it creaked open, I moved in first. It was dark inside, only the blue flicker of the TV lighting up the clutter. The smell hit immediately. Sweat, food gone bad, maybe mold. Papers and trash covered the floor. I stepped in slowly, hand near my belt, but not on my weapon. I called out again, "Belinda?" No answer. I moved further in, toward the back hallway where I guessed the bedroom would be. I heard a sudden movement, a heavy shuffle, feet scraping across linoleum. Then fast footsteps running. I raised my hand and shouted, "Stop! Don't move!" Too late. She came charging from the hallway, barefoot, wild hair matted to her face, eyes wide like she hadn't slept in days. Her right hand was raised above her head, fingers tight around a long kitchen knife. She screamed as she ran toward me. Something about liars and poison and everyone watching. I pulled back, hand going to my sidearm, but I didn't draw it. Not yet. I raised my other hand and tried to de-escalate. "Belinda, put it down. You don't want this to go bad." She kept coming, 10 feet away, knife high. I stepped back. "Belinda, listen to me. Just stop. Look at me. Put the knife down." She wasn't listening. eyes locked onto mine but not seeing me. Not really. She was breathing hard, almost panting, her arms shaking, but the knife stayed up. I backed toward the entryway, trying to buy time. I shouted for the bailiffs to stay back. She kept shouting over me, saying we were trying to take her organs and they got to you too. 6 feet. 5. The light from the hallway hit her face. Her skin was pale, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked. I could smell her breath, sour, metallic. 4 feet. Belinda, last chance, you gotta stop. She lunged. When she lunged forward, I had no choice but to grab her wrist. The knife shook in her grip, and we both stumbled back against the wall. Her elbow clipped my jaw. I shoved her off balance, trying to keep her arm locked away from my body. We slammed into a shelf that collapsed behind us, sending junk and glass tumbling. We struggled for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. I had both hands on her arm now, trying to force the knife away. She screamed in my face, spit flying, tears streaming. The blade got close, maybe an inch or two from my eye, before I managed to shove it sideways. She twisted with a burst of strength and dragged the knife downward. The blade cut across my forearm. I felt the slice before I saw it. Hot, sudden, like a line of fire under my skin. Blood started soaking my sleeve right away. The pain caught up fast, but I didn't let go. I gritted my teeth and wrenched the knife sideways, hard enough that her wrist cracked. She screamed again, and the weapon finally clattered to the floor. That's when the bailiffs jumped in. One grabbed her shoulders and dragged her back. The other got on her legs. I dropped to my knees, clutching my arm. The room was spinning, the heat and stink of the apartment closing in. Belinda kept screaming, kicking and twisting, even as they pinned her face down on the carpet. Her voice was hoarse now, raw from all the yelling, but she didn't stop. Just kept repeating the same sentence, over and over. You're part of it. You're part of it. You're part of it. When they got the cuffs on her, she stopped moving, just laid there, breathing fast, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. Completely vacant. It was like the fight had drained out of her all at once. The paramedics arrived 5 minutes later. They took me to the emergency room while another crew transported Belinda to the psychiatric hospital. I was still gripping my arm with a rag soaked in blood when I got into the ambulance. The EMT told me it didn't look like an artery hit, but we'd know for sure once the bleeding slowed. I didn't say much, just kept thinking how close the knife had come to my face. At the hospital, the doctor gave me 12 stitches, said I was lucky. The cut ran clean across the muscle, but no nerve damage and no artery. I could move my fingers. That was the main thing. I got tetanus shots, antibiotics, gauze, the whole routine. While I was getting patched up, one of the officers I knew came by with some background on Belinda. She'd been diagnosed bipolar in her early 20s, off and on meds for years. Her mother had tried to get her back into treatment when she stopped showing up for check-ins, but Belinda had threatened her during a phone call. After that, the family backed off, said they'd called Adult Protective Services, but nothing came of it. Belinda had legally declined help. The system can't force treatment unless someone becomes a clear danger. That happened today. The neighbors had seen signs, loud arguments with nobody, leaving the stove on all night. Once, she threw a frying pan out the window onto the sidewalk below. Someone said she believed the power lines were sending signals into her brain. Another neighbor said she stopped answering the door completely 2 weeks before the eviction notice went final. Everyone agreed she needed help, but nobody really knew what to do. I recovered completely from the physical injury, but the incident changed how I approached mental health calls. Before that day, I thought I could talk anyone down if I just used the right words. Calm voice, Steady hands, keep them grounded, basic stuff we all got trained on. But what nobody really says is that sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't touch the place they're in. I learned that the hard way. After the Belinda call, our department revised protocol. Now, any high-risk mental health situation triggers a joint response. At least one mental health professional rides with us if they're available. Officers go in teams, not solo. And we take warning signs more seriously. Paranoia, reports of weapons, long-term isolation. No more hoping it'll resolve with a conversation and a clipboard. I still think about Belinda sometimes. I never found out what happened to her after that day. I know she was placed on a 72-hour hold. Whether she stayed in treatment or went back home, I couldn't say. But I remember her eyes. The way they looked past me like I wasn't even there. Like I was a shadow of whatever was haunting her. That case taught me that desperation and untreated mental illness can turn anyone into a threat. Not because they're bad people. Not because they want to hurt someone. But because their mind tells them the world is coming for them, and their body reacts like it's life or death. You never know what someone is capable of when they feel like they have nothing left to lose. When I was 17, my friend Ryan and I stayed in town during spring break, while everyone else from our grade took off for the school trip to Washington, D.C. Ryan's place was at the edge of town, not far from the river trail and surrounded by woods. There weren't any neighbors close by, just trees and one long dirt driveway. It was the kind of place that always felt too quiet at night. You could hear every sound, every creak of the house, every animal outside. I didn't like sleeping over, but Ryan and I had made plans to hang out all week. Mostly it was just the two of us, biking around or going to the gas station for snacks. We'd been meeting up with some girls from school every night that week. They lived over on the west side near the community center, so after hanging out, we had to walk a few miles back to Ryan's house. The fastest way was through the park, then across the footbridge and down the old paved trail behind the softball field. It cut the walk nearly in half, but was barely lit. The first 2 nights were uneventful, just cold and dark, and we kept our heads down and moved fast. The third night, though, we saw someone behind us. Just a figure, a guy, maybe 30 yards back. He wasn't doing anything, just walking the same direction. At first, I didn't think much of it, but Ryan kept glancing over his shoulder. The man wasn't gaining on us, but he wasn't falling behind either. Just keeping pace. I tried to laugh it off, said, "He's probably just walking home or something." But Ryan wasn't buying it. He kept looking back and even told me to pick up the pace. I didn't say it out loud, but something about the guy was bothering me too. He wasn't talking on a phone or smoking or doing anything. Just walking, arms at his sides, head down. By the time we got to Ryan's house, we didn't see him anymore. Maybe he'd turned off, or maybe he wasn't even following us to begin with. Ryan double-checked the front door before locking it. We didn't talk much the rest of the night, just watched YouTube videos and ate chips. But neither of us brought it up again. The next night, we saw him again. Same spot, maybe a block earlier this time. Still far behind, still moving slow, like he was trying not to get too close. Ryan said he was sure it was the same guy. I wasn't convinced, but the way he was acting made me start to believe it. He wasn't walking a dog. He didn't have a bag. He wasn't dressed like someone out for exercise. Just jeans, a jacket, and that steady pace. When we got to the footbridge, Ryan whispered, "Let's cut through the woods, just this once." But I shook my head. That would have taken us even further from the main trail. "We're being paranoid," I told him. I said it out loud like I believed it. If he wanted to do something, he would have by now. Ryan didn't argue, but I could tell he hated the idea of staying on the path. Back at his house, Ryan pulled the curtains closed before we turned the TV on. I stayed up later than usual that night, just watching the front windows and trying not to admit how uneasy I felt. We saw him again the night after that. This time, he was a little closer. Still just far enough that we couldn't make out his face, but close enough that we could see how stiff his movements were. He didn't swing his arms when he walked. He didn't look around. He just stared straight ahead, following, not speeding up, not slowing down. When we reached the back door, Ryan locked it without me even needing to remind him. We didn't say anything about what we'd seen, but both of us were thinking the same thing now. It wasn't random. Whoever he was tracking us. That much was obvious. Ryan wanted to start taking the long way back, past the bowling alley and through the residential streets. But I told him we were overreacting. If we change routes now, I said, we're basically admitting he's got us scared. I told him that, but the truth was, I just didn't want to admit I was scared too. My gut had been tight all day. On the last night of break, Ryan's parents left for the weekend. They went to visit his grandmother out in Beech Grove, so we had the house to ourselves. We were out late again with the girls, watching a movie at one of their places. I don't even remember which one. We didn't leave until after 3, and when we stepped out, the street was dead quiet. No cars, no lights in the houses, just that orange glow from the street lamps and the hum of power lines overhead. Halfway through the walk home, we both noticed the man again. Same distance back, maybe a little closer now. We didn't speak. We didn't stop. We just walked a little faster and didn't look back again. I remember the cold in my chest, the way my breath hitched each time I thought I heard something behind us. Every twig snapping, every shuffle on the gravel path made me jump a little. When we got to Ryan's driveway, we practically ran the rest of the way, slammed the front door and locked it, then the deadbolt, then the little latch near the top. We didn't talk about what we saw, just turned on the TV and lay down on the couch with a couple blankets. We didn't brush our teeth or change. We just passed out sometime before the sun came up. I remember thinking how glad I was the week was over, that we'd made it through without anything actually happening. I was still telling myself it was all just a weird coincidence. Just some guy who happened to walk the same path as us. Nothing more. We didn't lock the front door that night. I still think about that. Around 5 in the morning, I woke up to a slow, steady knock at the front door. It wasn't loud at first, but it kept coming, like whoever was on the other side didn't want to wake up the whole street, just us. Then came a voice. A woman's voice, soft but clear. "Hello? Please, can you open up? I need help. Someone's chasing me." Ryan sat up immediately. I froze, still lying down, listening. Her voice didn't sound panicked. No crying, no gasping for breath, no fear in it. She just sounded patient, calm, too calm, like someone reading a script. Ryan and I looked at each other, not saying a word. We both knew something was off. I whispered, "Don't say anything." He nodded, barely moving. The knocking kept going. "Please, I'm not lying," the woman said, a little louder now. "He's following me. He was behind me, please." Then the knocking turned into banging. The door handle jiggled, and I could see the knob moving. She was trying to open it. Her voice changed too, sharper now. "Open the damn door!" she barked. We didn't move. We didn't say anything. I remember feeling my pulse in my ears, just staring at the front door. Then, out of nowhere, we heard a second voice. A man's voice. Calm, low, like he was standing just a few feet away. "Good choice," he said. That was it. Just those 2 words. Then silence. I got up slowly, heart pounding, and crawled over to the side window near the couch. I moved the curtain maybe an inch. Outside, under the dim porch light, I saw them. The woman was standing next to a man. He was tall, wearing a jacket with the hood up, but even from the side, I knew it was the same guy we'd seen on the trail. He didn't look back at the house. Neither of them did. They just turned and walked down the driveway, past the mailbox, then up the street. They weren't panicking. They weren't even looking around. It was like they were leaving a diner after a bad meal. No rush, no concern. Just walking away like nothing had happened. I let the curtain fall and slid back to the floor. Ryan was sitting against the arm of the couch, knees up, staring at the door. "Was it them?" he whispered. I just nodded. Neither of us tried to go back to sleep. We sat there the rest of the morning with the lights on, not saying much. Every time we heard a car go by, we'd check the window. Around noon, Ryan's parents got back. They found us exactly where we'd been all night, both of us still in the clothes we'd worn the day before. Ryan's dad asked what was going on, and we told them everything. Every detail. The walks home, the man who followed us, the knocking, the voices. His mom's face went pale. His dad didn't say much, just picked up the phone and called the police. When the officers came, they actually took it seriously. One of them nodded while we talked and said this kind of thing had been happening more lately. He said sometimes it was just burglars looking for an easy way in, but other times, it didn't stop there. They watch houses, watch routines. Look for the ones with bad locks or open doors. The woman is bait, used to make it seem like an emergency. He said we'd done the right thing not opening up. Said it straight out. You probably saved yourselves. They took our statements and drove around the area, but it had been too long. The couple was gone. No cameras on Ryan Street, no license plates, no names. Just 2 strangers blending back into the city. After that, everything changed. I never took that trail again, not even during the day. If I had to walk anywhere at night, I stayed on main roads with traffic and lights. Ryan was even more paranoid. He installed extra locks on his windows and got motion lights for the backyard. He stopped going out at night completely for a while. I started locking every door behind me, even in my own house. Front door, back door, even the bathroom sometimes. It just became automatic. And I stopped brushing things off when something felt wrong. I started trusting that gut feeling, that twist in my stomach that says, this isn't normal. We never saw those people again. I don't know if they moved on or if they found someone else who did open the door, but I've thought about it a lot. What would have happened if we had? If we'd believed her? If we just unlatched that deadbolt out of instinct or kindness? It doesn't take much. Just one bad choice. 1 second of trust in the wrong person. Now I double-check every door. Every time. When I was 16, I helped my Aunt Jennifer with her cleaning business during school breaks. She ran everything on her own, mostly working with local families or rental properties between tenants. That summer, she got a call from someone named Mrs. Reed about cleaning a large house in the suburbs. The house was a 2-story colonial with a wide front porch and ivy climbing up one side. Mrs. Reed explained over the phone that she'd be staying with her sister for a few weeks, along with her granddaughter Caitlin, and needed someone to come by and do a full deep clean while the house was empty. She left the key under a flower pot on the back porch and said we could let ourselves in. It sounded easy enough, and the pay was decent, so we took the job. The house was located a bit out of the way, with the nearest neighbors about half a mile down the road. It sat on a hill surrounded by trees on 3 sides and a long gravel driveway out front. From the start, it gave me kind of a weird vibe. Too quiet, almost like the place had been empty longer than just a week or two. There was no mail in the box, no garbage bins out, and the driveway looked like it hadn't been driven on in a while. We started at 9 in the morning. Aunt Jennifer vacuumed and scrubbed the downstairs while I handled the windows upstairs and dusted the bedrooms. Everything was pretty normal until late in the day. By 9 p.m. we were just finishing up. It was one of those summer days where the sky doesn't go fully dark until well past 8, and there was still a faint orange glow outside as I stood on a small ladder cleaning one of the second-floor windows. That's when I heard the front door slam downstairs. It wasn't a creak or a soft close. It was a loud slam, the kind that echoed through the house and made the floor vibrate slightly under my feet. I froze for a second, still holding the window cloth. My first thought was that Aunt Jennifer had gone outside, and maybe the wind caught the door. I stepped down off the ladder and walked into the hallway, listening for her voice or footsteps. Instead, I heard a man's voice from downstairs. "Katie! Katie, Daddy's here!" He sounded excited, like someone reuniting with a kid after a long time. But the voice didn't belong to anyone I recognized, and nobody was supposed to be here except us. I moved slowly toward the stairs and peeked down. The lights were on in the entryway, but I didn't see anyone yet. Then I heard the footsteps. Heavy ones, boots maybe, stomping from one room to another on the first floor. Doors opening and slamming. Then the voice again, louder, more desperate. "Katie, come on out, baby girl. Daddy just wants to talk." I backed away from the staircase. Something was wrong. Mrs. Reed never mentioned anyone else having access to the house. Aunt Jennifer appeared in the hallway from the far side, her eyes wide. She held her phone tightly in her hand and whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "She said no one else would be here," she muttered, like she was trying to convince herself. Downstairs, something crashed, like a chair or table getting knocked over, and the man's voice got angrier. "I know you're in here. Why are you hiding from me, huh? You think you can keep her away from me?" He was talking to someone who wasn't answering. Maybe to us, maybe to no one. Either way, it didn't sound like he was in his right mind. Aunt Jennifer grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the master bedroom. It was the only room on that side of the house with a solid deadbolt. She locked the door behind us and immediately called 911. She gave them the address and explained what was happening in a low voice while I stood in the corner, listening to the footsteps getting closer to the stairs. The dispatcher told us to stay hidden and quiet. Officers were on their way. Aunt Jennifer put the phone on speaker and set it down on the carpet as we crouched behind the bed. We heard the man stomping up the stairs, still yelling, "Katie, come out! I'm not gonna hurt you, I swear to God. I just want to see my little girl." His voice was hoarse now, like he'd been shouting for hours. We stayed completely still, not making a sound. The floor creaked outside the bedroom. He was checking the other rooms, slamming doors open, mumbling to himself. Then he came to ours. The doorknob rattled once. "Is she in here?" he asked the silence. "You got her in here, don't you? You think you can lock me out of my own damn house?" He pounded on the door. Not hard enough to break it, but loud enough to make the walls shake. Aunt Jennifer covered her mouth. I just stared at the door, heart thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. After a minute, the banging stopped. We heard him move back down the hallway. The dispatcher kept talking in a calm voice, updating us. Officers were pulling up to the property. The man was still stomping around somewhere in the house. The last thing we heard before the sirens outside was his voice yelling from downstairs again. "Katie, come say hi to your dad." The man was getting angrier because he couldn't find Caitlin. We heard him yelling at no one, just stomping through the upstairs hallway, slamming doors open and closed like a madman. His voice kept rising, cracking at the edges. "Don't hide from me, Katie," he shouted. "You think this is a game? I'm your father." Then, all at once, his voice stopped. We held our breath. Aunt Jennifer looked at me, eyes wide, finger over her lips. I could hear him moving closer again. Heavy boots, slow this time. Like he was listening too. I didn't mean to make a sound. It just came out. A soft whimper from the back of my throat. Maybe panic, maybe just instinct. But he heard it. He stopped walking for half a second, and then I heard him run. The impact on the door shook the whole wall. A deep, loud boom, followed by his voice screaming, "Katie, let me in, baby! I know you're in there!" He slammed his fists into the door again and again. Then it sounded like he threw his whole body against it. The wood groaned and cracked. Pieces of the door frame started to split and snap with each hit. "Open the door!" he shouted, his voice cracked and ragged, like he'd been crying or yelling for hours. I could hear him panting, grunting as he shoved against the door with all his weight. The dispatcher's voice kept coming through the phone, calm but urgent. "Just hold on. Officers are right outside. Do not open that door. Stay low and stay silent." I thought he was going to come through any second. Each slam got louder, angrier, more desperate. Then something metallic clanged against the wood. Maybe his belt buckle, maybe something he'd grabbed from the hallway. The door started to bow in the middle. I held onto the carpet with both hands, staring at the crack forming next to the lock, just waiting for it to burst open. And then, finally, we heard them. Police cars, tires crunching on gravel, doors slamming, voices shouting. "Police! Drop what you're doing!" someone yelled from downstairs. The banging on the door stopped. We heard boots thudding away from us, someone yelling back, "She's my daughter. I'm not leaving without her." "Hands where we can see them," another officer shouted. Then more shouts, some metal clinking, and the unmistakable voice of the man shouting, "I just want to see her. That's my girl. You can't keep her from me." It went quiet for a moment. Aunt Jennifer stood up first and carefully unlocked the door. I followed her into the hallway, both of us moving slowly, like we didn't trust it to really be over. An officer met us on the stairs. "You're safe now," he said quickly, scanning us. "Are either of you injured?" We shook our heads. He led us outside. There were 3 police cruisers parked in the driveway, their lights flashing against the trees. 2 officers were walking the man in cuffs toward a car. He was red-faced and sweaty, hair matted down, hands shaking. He looked nothing like someone who should be around a child. He kept turning back toward the house. "Katie, Daddy loves you. Don't let them lie to you." One of the officers stood with us while we gave our statements. He explained that the man was Mrs. Reed's ex-son-in-law. He used to live in the house with her daughter before the divorce. He lost custody after repeated incidents, drinking, threats. One time he'd tried to drive off with Caitlin during an argument. After that, the court terminated his rights completely. No visitation, no contact. But he hadn't let it go. He'd been showing up at their church, waiting outside Caitlin's school, even banging on their door in the middle of the night. Mrs. Reed had taken out a restraining order. But tonight, she'd gone to visit family and left the house empty. He must have thought that was his chance. Somehow, he convinced himself that Caitlin was hiding inside. He hadn't known we were just cleaners. After they drove him away, everything felt cold and still. I realized I hadn't stopped shaking the whole time. My arms and legs felt numb. The next few days blurred together. I kept seeing flashes of his face. That moment the door cracked. I couldn't sleep at all the first week. Aunt Jennifer called Mrs. Reed to tell her what happened. She was horrified, crying on the phone, kept apologizing over and over. We both stopped taking jobs after dark, and we never worked in remote houses again, no matter how much they paid. Aunt Jennifer updated her business policy. Now she called the homeowners herself before every job, and she'd only work where someone nearby could check in. She started carrying pepper spray in her cleaning apron, and I noticed she always checked the locks 3 times before we got started. I ended up seeing a therapist for a while. The sound of that man's voice stuck with me. How fast love can turn into something dangerous. He really thought he was doing something right, like he had a right to be there, to take his daughter. And in his head, we were the ones stopping him. That's what scared me the most. How sure he was. Even now, I still think about Caitlin. I wonder if she remembers that night. If she knew how close her father came to hurting 2 strangers because he couldn't let go. I wonder if she ever thinks about the kind of man he turned into. People always talk about strangers being the danger, but sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's someone who loves you too much in the wrong way. And that kind of love doesn't protect anyone. It just breaks things.